Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I think we could go ahead. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Yara Saab. I'm director of the Euro-Mediterranean Economists Association. And it's really great to see a mix of very different colleagues from different sectors, be it researchers, policymakers, finance colleagues. And what we really know in this perspective is that we cannot be having this conversation without different representatives of stakeholders in the room. So it's a pleasure for EMEA to be organizing this important event in the framework of the ReForest and DigitAF projects funded under Horizon Europe. And we're really pleased to be collaborating with colleagues from EURAF and DeFAF. And special thanks, of course, to CEPS for hosting us. So this important meeting is being held back-to-back with a meeting of partners of the ReForest project, which, as I mentioned, is a Horizon Europe initiative aimed at advancing agroforestry, climate resilience, and sustainable land use in Europe. It focuses on integrating trees, crops, and sometimes livestock in the same production system for several outcomes that we are aware of. So food production, climate adaptation, and mitigation, as well as support for biodiversity and rural development. This is a key moment for this discussion as we are at a turning point when it comes to Europe's agricultural landscape. The context, of course, as we know, are ongoing discussions among decision makers with the different European institutions in relation to the future of the CAP within the broader context of the MFF negotiations. So Europe's agricultural model is really being stress tested in real time. With dangerous projections on temperature rise expected to overshoot 1.5 degrees, I think the question is no longer about whether sustainable farming is viable, but whether our current ways of treating our food systems under a business as usual scenario is viable. So under this scenario, we are likely to see, and the science says, crop yields decline, particularly with a strong impact in Southern Europe, soil degradation accelerating, and water scarcity becoming even more structural. So what we need to tackle here is really the false choice between productivity and high food yields on the one hand, and climate mitigation and adaptation, biodiversity protection, and sound water and soil management on the other. The real challenge is not choosing between productivity and sustainability, but really redesigning the system so that we can deliver on both. Redesigning agricultural systems that are productive because they are resilient and not at the expense of resilience. And this is where agroforestry comes in. This is a moment for us to better understand obstacles to the uptake of this practice in Europe, as well as highlighting the opportunities that the practice offers. There is ample scientific evidence that agroforestry offers a transformative, nature-based pathway. This evidence is produced and stress-tested by a lot of experts and thought leaders who are with us in the room today. It enhances, as we know, carbon sequestration, strengthens ecosystem services, it improves soil health and water management, and diversifies farm income. It's scientifically validated, economically viable, and environmentally essential. Yet, despite its well-documented benefits, agroforestry remains underscaled across Europe, and as we know, it covers less than 9% of the EU's utilized agricultural area. So why hasn't agroforestry scaled? Partners here have identified several structural barriers to uptake, which we will be discussing this afternoon. And I will mention just a few, one of which are governance barriers, the other are financial barriers, economic valuation challenges, and limitations also of existing systems from insurance and tailored mechanisms. So we think that current negotiations really offer an opportunity to remedy these challenges. The post-CAP framework has the potential to align climate, agriculture, and land use, and move us beyond a siloed implementation. So the next CAP, or the post-CAP, is not just about agricultural policy reform. It is a test of whether Europe can align its food systems, ensuring food security with planetary boundaries in an uncertain world. So the question is whether policy, finance, and governance will finally catch up with the evidence. I'd like to also add that this is not just an internal European conversation. The path that the EU decides to choose will contribute to its global standing. The EU is already shaping global norms through carbon markets, through sustainability finance, and biodiversity policy. If Europe gets agroforestry right within its post-CAP framework, it can define what credibly nature-based agriculture can look like globally. And it will align its own agricultural and land use with the transitions it advocates for globally sustainable practices. And therefore, that enhances its credibility. And this is what we want to tackle during today's dialogue, where we will first hear from coordinators of the ReForest and DigitAF projects and partners from EURAF and colleagues of mine at EMEA to give us an overview of the outcomes under these two consortia. My colleague Christine will run us through the agenda for this afternoon, but I'd really want to thank everyone for your interest in this important event and thank our panelists for what is going to be definitely an insightful conversation this afternoon. It's really important to highlight that we have 26 partners under the DigitAF project and 11 projects under ReForest, so we're really within a context of different consortia that are bringing in high-level excellence and expertise and can really contribute to this discussion. Lastly, thanks to Horizon Europe and the UK Research and Innovation for making this work possible. And I'd personally love to also thank my colleagues, Christine and Thiago, for really a lot of heavy lifting and making this event possible on our end. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Yara, for these kind words. I will also ask directly the technical team if we can ensure people online are seeing the screen and the presentation. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to this policy dialogue on upscaling agroforest Europe. It is really wonderful to see you, many of you here today. This event is organized in the framework of the ReForest and DigitAF projects by the European Economists Association in collaboration with the European Agroforestry Federation, EURAF, and the German Association for Agroforestry, DeFAF. We are very grateful to all partners for making this afternoon possible. Let me briefly walk you through what we have for today. So following these opening remarks, we will hear from key policy relevant research outputs of the project from both ReForest and DigitAF. So we'll discuss concrete findings that we hope will feed directly into the discussions that follow. We will then move to two structured policy dialogues. The first one will discuss how the new national and regional partnership plan can be used to finally break down the policy silos that have held agroforestry back for too long. And the second focused on financing challenge, exploring how blended finance, carbon market, and innovative instruments can make agroforestry genuinely bankable for farmers and attractive to investors. There will be a coffee break between the two policy dialogue sessions, and we will close the evening with a networking reception. So please do stay for that. Now, it is my great pleasure to invite our first speaker to deliver the opening remarks. She brings with her a combination of deep technical expertise and high-level policy experiences. As a research policy officer at the Director General for Agriculture and Rural Development of the European Commission, she leads the science policy dialogue on agroecology, agroforestry, and organic farming, portfolios that sit at the very heart of today's conversation. Please join me in welcoming Susana Goana Saiz.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, first of all, I should say to the two projects, I'm very happy to be here, and notably, since I was introduced earlier by the colleague. I'm working in the Director General for Agriculture and Rural Development in the European Commission and the Unit for Research and Innovation, which means we have the responsibility for programming the calls for projects, collaborative projects in the Horizon Europe Cluster 6. So basically, all the calls on agriculture, rural development and forestry are under our responsibility. And in particular case, I am in charge indeed of the portfolio on agroecology, organic farming, where I also deal with agroforestry and mixed farming approaches. So I'm not going to deliver a very long presentation. I'm not going to insist on why we the reasons why we fund research in agroforestry, you know, the challenges, you know, why it is really one of those areas where research and innovation can, I believe, make a big difference for the reasons explained already. So there is evidence, but perhaps there needs to be more evidence even on the context specificity of the implementation of the approach, not to talk about the needs to improve evidence for policy making, but several other aspects that justify why we invest in research in this area. Usually in our calls, we always request, and something that is very relevant, we believe in the case of agricultural research, to facilitate opportunities for exchanges of best practices, identification of challenges, opportunities. All this is also part of important work that you're doing in your projects, and in the case of agroforestry is particularly relevant. So, I mean, in the case of, let's say, our priorities, what we have had already under Horizon 2020, the previous framework program, we had already a stream of projects working on agroecological farming, as we call it in a more general terms. And that included some projects already on mixed farming, agroforestry, where maybe some of you have been involved. And this has been, so research in agroecological farming has been further boosted in Horizon Europe. You may know there have been, and there are several running projects very relevant on agroforestry, but also mixed farming. And we are actually using several instruments under Horizon Europe to do this. So we have, of course, the research projects, such as your projects, DigitAF and ReForest, but we also use other instruments, such as the Mission Soil, which is, whose objective is really to achieve soil health in Europe by 2030, where there are also opportunities for agroforestry research. And last but not least, we also have a partnership on agroecology running that is expanding with a lot of partners, and also having activities relevant for agroforestry. So really, there are plenty of opportunities there, and plenty of opportunities also for projects and initiatives to come together and to yield evidence that is needed. And as it was said at the beginning, it's true that we are at a very nice and timely moment in the EU with the preparations for the next CAP, the preparations of the next framework program for research and innovation as well, the new European Competitiveness Fund. So let's see, of course, negotiations are progressing. We do not have details here, but we hope that we will continue to have a high budget for agricultural research and continue to provide opportunities for your area. So that's what I wanted to say. I'm looking forward to the debate and very happy also to have the colleagues working on different policy aspects in the Commission joining, which is very, very, very pertinent and very good. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your participation, for making the time to come to our event, and for your kind words. I will now invite the project coordinators of ReForest and DigitAF, Martin Lukac, Marie Gosme, and my dear colleague Tiago Zibecci, as well as Jerry, who was not able to join us in person, but is connected online and will make his intervention online. So Martin, if you want to kickstart.
Thank you. Do I have a clicker to switch the slides? Thank you. Right. Thank you for coming. I was not expecting this many people to turn up to listen about policy and finance on agroforestry. I admit to that, so thank you. My name is Martin Lukac. I am the coordinator of the ReForest project. I'll start by thanking all the people. These are some of them that worked on the project and still do work on the project. We have created many different outcomes and outputs, which I hope will be useful for a lot of people. That was the aim of the project. I will show you just a couple of items, kind of high-level overview of things that I think relate to the topics of the discussion panels today. So bear in mind that the project is a lot more complex than what I will show you. So just to describe the direction of travel and the thinking behind it, what we set out to do is to mainstream agroforestry. I think there is plenty of evidence that agroforestry gives you carbon sequestration, better water yield, soil biodiversity, makes you happier, the landscape looks better. I could go on and on and on. And also it grows food, which is nice. So then the question is, why on earth is everybody not doing it? And that's what we were trying to unpick. So what we want to do in ReForest, in the project, is to create evidence, package it, and make it available to the relevant actors so that they can use it in order to hopefully make agroforestry a more dominant land use type in Europe. There are several key items which we followed on. Finance and regulation and policy are the bits which we'll be talking about today. Alongside that, we were looking at information base, because farmers say, look, I would like to do it, but I don't know how. So I need to either be able to talk to my fellow farmers or have access to an information base, which we created. I'll show you in a sec. There needs to be some system of verification and monitoring that hopefully will underpin the finance. So that was the second bit. And then finally, we were trying to see what the key barriers are and how to jump over them. So I'll show you three things, I promised. The first one is a platform which EMEA, our partner, have created. This is free to use. You just need to register to make an account, and then you have access to all the information that we've gathered. There is a knowledge hub on agroforestry, which the knowledge is generated by the project itself, but also we hoovered as much agroforestry information from all other projects we could find to have it all in one place. So there is the knowledge hub, and then the other part, which is important, is in the platform, there is the possibility to discuss, join groups, interest groups, and discuss agroforestry in from various different angles. We have created the platform in a multilingual shape, in that if I am a farmer in the Czech Republic, say, and I'll write a question in Czech, a farmer in Spain will see my question in Spanish and can answer. So we try to cross the usual language barrier, which is ever present in Europe. It's fine to talk science in English to scientists. If you start talking to farmers, it doesn't travel that well. So we try to get around it. The second bit I'll show you is where we unpicked how do this system actually perform, both for productivity but for other benefits too. So we created underlying understanding and models of what do these systems do, and then what we try to do is to use the output of these models to integrate agroforestry into an actual farm business as a business. So this is where the farmer can see, what is this going to do for me? How am I going to perform? What is it that I'm going to get? Which is important. And then the last one, probably the most relevant to today, is finance and innovation. So one of the things we set out to do in the project is to involve, or even just start talking to people that develop tools, actual tools used by people. So I have two examples. Farm3 is an existing company. It's a partner on the project, and they have an existing agroforestry model which can make predictions for decades hence. Okay, so this is a commercially available product which we integrate the knowledge from the project into. And the other example I give you is an agroforestry consultancy which is aiming to create a business model in the gap between the farmer and the funder, whomever the funder may be. So farmers say that to access funding is often very complicated. I have to fill in many, many forms in order to get what I want. So what Deep Roots are trying to do is to sit in the middle and create a business out of consulting with both sides and making the whole system work. So just a couple of examples of types of companies and products we try to help along in the project. So that was my very quick overview of the project. Like I said, it's much bigger than just that, so do come and talk to us if you have any questions, and I'll hand over to Marie, which will talk about DigitAF.
Thank you. So yes, I'm Marie Gauve. I'm a coordinator of DigitAF. It's a sister project with ReForest. And in this project, just to tell you very quickly the aims, it was to develop, improve, and most importantly, test and get feedback with users, digital tools to boost agroforestry. And we had 3 target groups, which were the policymakers, because they set the scene for the adoption or not of agroforestry, the practitioners who actually do agroforestry in the field, and the beneficiaries of agroforestry products and services, because they give value to agroforestry. And we work with these target groups. We had one work package for each target group. So our project was really user-centered, and we used a distributed approach. Instead of doing one big thing that would do everything, we developed tools that had a specific objective, and we were working on making them interoperable. And that way, the philosophy of fair development was very important into the project. And this was concretely done in the field through 6 living labs in 6 different countries that gathered together the different types of stakeholders. And with them, we had a workshop to gather information, to test the tools, to get feedback, to identify barriers. We made studies, etc., surveys, I mean. And we also had field days to demonstrate some innovations, and also to discuss about the practical technical barriers that they could have. As for ReForest, we worked on many different subjects. We had different working groups on biodiversity, on tree species selection, etc. And I'm just going to present you 3 results that I thought were relevant for today's discussion, which is the evaluation of the financial costs and benefits of agroforestry. So we analyzed existing tools for cost and benefit evaluation, and looked at their suitability for different types of farms, depending on what the farm had. Did they have animals? Did they have fruit trees or just timber trees, etc.? What was the scope of the tool, and organize them for helping people to choose the right tool for their need. And we also tested 4 of these tools in living labs on actual farms. So that allowed us to test with the real cases the tools, and it also allowed us, well, to gather information on the cost and benefit of agroforestry, which are not always in favor of agroforestry. Here, this table is quite complicated because depending on the case study, we use different tools because not all tools are adapted to all countries, to all types of systems, to all commercialization, etc., of products. But the thing to get is that even when agroforestry is beneficial, there is the time for positive return can be quite long. And so there is a high initial investment, and it can be difficult for farms. Even if it's positive in the long run, it's difficult to make this investment. A second result that I would like to present is the analysis. So these are real measurements of soil organic carbon content in soils in the 6 different, actually this one was 7 different farms and agroforestry systems. And you can see that this carbon content, it's a hugely variable. This is the delta between the value in agroforestry and the value in the control. And you can see that it goes from almost no effect or even a slight, very small negative effect in the Netherlands. So UK and Netherlands have not much effect. And it can go up to plus 3% of carbon content, for example, in the topsoil in Spain. The bottom graph is the bulk density. For this one, it's more consistent, the results. It's always red, but it means good for plants because a lower soil bulk density means lower soil compaction, which means better water storage capacity, better rooting of the plants, etc. Another thing that we worked on was data, because it's digital is not only models, it's also data. And we looked at the data that is available for MRV and also for checking the compliance with the different regulations. And we noticed that some data that could be used, for example, the JRC map of forestry, which is used for the EUDR regulation, has a lot of errors. It has a lot of errors because it relies too much on Earth observation and not enough on other sources of data. So here we crossed data from the CEPS, the LPIS system of Spain, and we showed that actually a lot of so it's all which is in this kind of brownish green, is classified as forest, but actually it's not. It's agroforest. So it should be outside of the scope of the EUDR, and farmers should be able to sell their products because it's agroforest. And so this is just an illustration to show that we cannot rely on only one source of data, and we need reliable data and easy to collect. And for that, we looked at existing data, which is already collected, like for the CEPS data, that could be used for different, which is relevant for agroforestry, different measures, both for the CAP, for the LULUCF, for the NRR, the UDR, the CRCF, etc., and trying to not add a new layer of complexity, but rather use existing data, which is already collected for new uses. And for that, we need to harmonize land use data, because we have shown that each member state has different codes, and they evolve through time, so it's very difficult to make everything work together. And it's also, for me, I'm begging for better compliance with the INSPIRE directive for high-value data sets. That would really change the life of farmers if it's possible to follow the Commission mantra, which is to collect data only once and use it several times. And that's all for the general presentation. Of course, as for ReForest, DigitAF studied many, many different things, very interesting results. But well.
Hi, Jerry. I heard you on the Zoom, but we're not hearing you in the room right now. So let's see if there is something from the technical team we can do.
Oh dear. I tested this with your colleague earlier on, and they said it was okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Thanks.
Wonderful. Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. So my apologies to everyone that I can't be there. I've had several days recently in bed with flu, so didn't wish to travel. But thank you very much for organizing such a wonderful conference. You can see my slides, I hope, very soon. So I'm going to be doing a very quick SWOT analysis of agroforestry with one slide on each of the issues. I can't myself see the slides. Do you want me to share? I'm presuming that you're doing it from the central file, Christine.
Yes, we should be able to share the files from here. Let me see with the technical team if we can share the slides from here and then still have Jerry on the, so we can put back the slides that we were using just right now.
Yeah.
Let us take a second. Okay, let's see if we can also see you. Oh, and we have Jerry on the right. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay. So So what you're seeing on the screen is a description of the new NRP's PP, so the National and Regional Partnership Program. So this is a dramatic change, as everyone will know, in the CEPS. So you're effectively building a combined budget of something like 865 billion euros. But the farming world is very upset that only 300 billion of that is earmarked over the time period of the next CAP, whereas the current CAP has around 386. So there are worries about the total and the earmarking for Pillar 1. But the challenge for agriculture will be to get as much as it can do from the regional component, from the other funds, which have to be bidded in for. So there's a total of 453 billion, which agroforestry and forestry and climate and everything else must do its best to bid for. So the next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the first slide of the SWOT, trying to capture the things that most of us will know about the strengths of agroforestry. And I see there's a mistake that the regional hydrology is in twice, but why not? Because it's very important. The EU has a water framework directive, and it also has a water initiative going on at the moment. So it's very important to stress the regional importance of water that is evaporated from trees and then falls downwind. So quite a lot of the water in Spain, where I'm currently living, for example, wouldn't fall if it wasn't for the forests in Portugal evaporating that water and letting it be carried downwind. So I can't go into detail on all of these, but note the importance of them for two things. One, we're expecting very soon from Brussels, we're expecting a livestock strategy. So note the crucial importance of livestock for animal welfare. Note also that we're expecting in June the protein strategy. So do remember that that leaves of trees are crucially important for the production of protein. So there are lots of areas that agroforestry is very strong. Move on to weaknesses now. Just on the next slide, which should come up in a minute, you're seeing at least I'm seeing it split. I'm seeing the title of it at the bottom somehow or other, but I'm presuming that it's okay in this on screen. But people online are seeing it in a strange layout. But never mind. What we're seeing are weaknesses there, and two things to focus on: the previous CAP period, 2014 to 2022. Note that member states originally planned to establish 89,000 hectares, only managed 5,000 hectares. In the period before then, it was even a smaller area that was established. So clearly the existing CAP has not been working. We've not been having the massive scale of establishment of agroforestry that we'd hoped for. Some things are improving. There was a mention of agroforestry in the strategic dialogue. Other things are not as we'd hoped. The DG Agri vision for agriculture sadly didn't have a single mention of agroforestry, and actually only had a couple of mentions of forestry. So it's still very very siloed in the interpretation that we're seeing from some of the EU departments, although things are improving. So move on to the opportunities. Next one, very quickly. So I'm going to give the 4 strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the main thing that I'm doing is presenting 10 potential actions that we need to take. So this is the best summary that I could provide of the potential opportunities available for us. The top left is talking about the multi-annual financial framework. Good things have been happening through the Green Deal. Good things are potentially happening through carbon farming, particularly if it moves beyond voluntary carbon farming into a statutory implementation of agricultural and forestry within the ETS, but that's a long-term goal. Good things have been happening in the past year about the opening up of data. So you see there the Open Data Directive compliance. There's still 7 countries which are not compliant in terms of making the open data available as an API with sufficiently good structure. Germany and Italy are there, although some of the regions are good, but in general, the majority of the regions, even in those 2 very big and very technological countries, don't meet the European standards. So I'm going to move on very quickly. You can see scanned the financial and economic opportunities for us, the opportunities in rural development. Some of those we'll be talking about later on in this presentation, and move on to the threats, which I'm terribly sorry, it's very red. So if you move on to the next slide, it's red because all sorts of reasons, but principally because of fire. And I do want to mention that last year, as you probably know, Europe lost almost 1 million. Sorry, there was something online there. Europe lost almost 1 million hectares of forest. But what is interesting is if you turn that 1 million hectares of forest into carbon dioxide emissions, you're actually talking about more than 38 million tons of carbon dioxide. If you add on the methane and nitrous oxide from those fires, you're talking about 46 million tons, which in terms of the European targets that we've got is absolutely huge. So we absolutely, forest fires need to be reduced, and a major role for agroforestry in doing that. Again, I won't dwell on those, but it does come back to one of the interesting things in the CRCF, so the Carbon Removal Certification Framework, is that you have to leave a pooled to account for the potential risk of reversal of the carbon that you're sequestering. So we do very much need to improve the scientific evidence of the degree to which agroforestry is potentially safer from fires and safer from wind throw, and if there's any potential risk with pests. Okay, so moving on to the next one, my last 10 slides, so move on to slide. This is a summary of the 10 recommendations that we're making for actions. Having looked at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, what are the actions that we can take to mitigate some of the risks and to exploit some of the opportunities and the strengths? They're laid out there, and maybe the panel can discuss some of those later on when we have the discussion. But I'm going to go through all 10 of those, starting with the next slide, if you can move on. So I'm not sure how well you guys can see that on the in the room, but there's a tendency to think that we should standardize everything. There's a tendency to think that we should harmonize the definition of agroforestry. Quite frankly, that's not possible. The EU asked the member states to come up with their own national definitions of agroforestry. They've all done that. So we've got 28 definitions because, of course, Belgium has 2 separate definitions for the 2 different bits of Belgium. And what we need to do is work very closely and harmoniously with the agriculture and the forestry departments of the member states to clarify these definitions, because they're not great at the moment, because a lot of them are based on a number of trees per hectare without any indication of what a tree is, whether it's a little seedling or whether it's bigger than that, and everybody's quite confused by most of these classifications. So the next challenge for the national and regional partnership plans is converting these definitions into measurable definitions. There's also some strange elements in them. If you look at the Danish one, it only recognized fruit, berry, and nut species as being agroforestry. If you look at the Portuguese one, it says it's only natural regeneration. The Portuguese say you effectively can't have a planted silvo-arable system. So for each of these countries, there are improvements to be made, and it's important too that the regions have a say in that. So that's number one. Number 2 slide. So next slide, please. In terms of the actions that need to be taken going forward, Marie mentioned that we've been trying to track within DigitAF the compliance of the member states with this, particularly for the land parcel information system and the geospatial aid application data which farmers fill in, the compliance with the 2023 high value data sets implementing regulation. And they're basically, as I showed before, there are these 7 countries that aren't meeting the targets. So I'd really stress that we need to move forward, and actually now there's only 7. I think the Commission could start thinking about compliance action. So that's an activity for DG Connect in conjunction with DG Agri and DG Klima, probably, because Klima are going to need it. Next slide, so this is slide number, or action number 3. Marie showed the other half of Extremadura here, so I'm showing Cáceres here. So the Department of Cáceres, which is part of Extremadura, the same thing. We've got these definitional problems, and we need to be able to see agroforestry parcels and forestry parcels on the same map. We shouldn't be having the agricultural department claiming land which is different to the forestry department. So that's action number 3. Action number 4 is the next one. Basically this is saying that we really need to get our act together, and when we pass a new legislation, we need to very carefully make sure that it doesn't make the world worse for farmers by introducing new criteria, new measures which are ill-defined and which nobody really knows what they mean. And I'm terribly sorry if there's someone from DG Environment in the audience at the moment, but this is really, I think, directed at you. We've got, when we introduced the Nature Restoration Regulation, they introduced several measures and indices which could have been the same as farmers already use, but which were introduced, which were all sorts of complications were introduced. And this wonderful Commission guidance, clarification notice, 2025, 980, is about 30 pages trying to understand words and terms which didn't need to be there in the first place. So let's try to simplify as much as possible the life of a farmer and ensure that data which is collected once can be used for many different things. Moving on to number 5, which is another potential action. We've heard about transition payments. EURAF is very keen on transition payments because we've seen that the previous 20 years haven't really caused the transition towards agroforestry so far. So something different needs to be done. So we have this goal, which is establishing 10% tree cover outside forests, probably on a municipality by municipality basis, certainly not on a farm by farm basis. But so therefore the trees need to be focused with greater incentives into where they can provide most environmental benefit. But we do need to remember those countries which already have huge quantities of forests, huge quantities of trees, and don't actually need very much more agroforestry. So there's already a way that was used for Norway and Finland in the 2014 Greening Regulation that we can apply. So there's tools for flexibility that we can use. Next slide, please. I've gone yellow, which means I'll have 30 seconds. Next slide, number 6. This is the main suggestion that we're making, which is using the map that shows those regions in Europe which have least trees and focusing support mainly onto those regions. So I've got 4 more slides. I'll go quickly on those. Next slide. Next slide now, number 7. Another bit of advice. This is probably going to be happening, so Valeria will be able to talk about this later on, but it's a little bit partial for the current carbon removal certification framework and the delegated act for carbon farming only to be looking at effectively things that are in the blue box there. So we're not looking at emissions from slurry or emissions of methane and nitrous oxide from enteric fermentation. So as quickly as we can, we need to close all these loops and ensure that we're accounting for the whole of the AFOLO, so the agricultural, forestry, and other land use sector. Next slide, slide number 8, is there. That's another thing, Valeria, I hope someone will ask Valeria about at some stage or other, is what we do to stop potentially penalizing the early movers when it comes to carbon farming. It should be a lot easier for carbon farmers who have plenty of trees because we can use remote sensing, we can use quite good records. So we can potentially go back, I would say at least to 2010 and recognize the efforts made by those farmers. So that's action number 8. Action number 9 is the next one. Which is looking further forward. We really need a decision made relatively soon about whether voluntary carbon farming is going to be enough, or whether we need to extend that by including agriculture and forestry in the EU emission trading scheme. And the last one, number 10, is a little game if you want to scan that QR code, because what is important is we see in EURAF and DigitAF, and lots of other people see as well, carbon farming is being absolutely crucial to be able to provide the long-term support for farmers at the end of cap payments that will be short term. The transition fund will go a long way, but it's upfront funding. So the transition fund might fund up to 200,000 euros to plant all your trees, but you still need a little bit of support at the end of the rotation for the carbon sequestration component of that. So cap payments and anything that replaces that, like the transition fund, also need to be planned together with potential stacking of additional payments from carbon farming and indeed additional payments from nature credits. So I'm sorry I've gone perhaps a minute, 2 minutes over, but I hope that was a good summary of the issues being confronted by all member states when it comes to the national and regional partnership plans. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Unfortunately, I must confess that my slides are not as fun as yours, but I think I can complement you quite well what I'll present next. So, what have we learned over the 4 years of ReForest? And even better, how can we leverage all this material, all our reports, deliverables, findings, into action, into policy language? So I think that one main and intriguing question that has been moving us, it's really to understand why is that agroforestry has been having such a low uptake over the past CEP years. As Jerry mentioned in one of his slides, is basically under 10% of the desired member state goals. So for that, we really dedicated a lot of work. We have conducted research, consulting living labs, farmers, researchers, financial market participants, the private sector, policymakers. So we try to touch on the whole agroforestry value chain. And well, I think we could get a little bit of the taste of what's happening on the ground. I think there we go. So when we try to cluster all these barriers into, we see that there are three main pressing bottlenecks and these interconnected systemic gaps that we can say. So the first one on policy, the second one on finance, investment, third one is the knowledge innovation gap. But before we dig in detail on these gaps, I think it's quite important to remember what's the current state that we are living. So this overarching polycrisis, and we're living through wars, pandemics, the digital demographic transitions, migration crisis, financial crisis, and of course the climate change crisis, as Yara at the beginning mentioned. We are reaching towards the 1.5 Celsius scenario, and this, of course, all this puts a lot of pressure on our future generations' survival rate chances. And as you all know, agroforestry it's an excellent candidate to help us move this scenario and help us adapt and mitigate unprecedented conditions. So I'm just pointing this all out because, well, we cannot derive any recommendations or analysis not disregarding this overarching policy polycrisis scenario that we live in. Okay, but this, of course, this will be a topic for of another panel itself, and let's get back to the three gaps that I want to share. So on the first one, I think Jerry covered quite extensively. I will pay attention not to repeat what he was mentioning, but more to echo what we have found over the years of ReForest. So the first, this conflict of priorities, we do see that it's quite clear how EU has been trying to balance food security with the climate agenda. So we understand that there are fiscal capacities and competitive sectors trying to fight for these agendas and budgets. So at the end, it's the question is still important on how the EU can achieve the desired triple win scenario, right, on securing quality and affordable food, protecting the environment, and improving the livelihoods of farmers and rural communities. On policy fragmentations, well, Jerry also mentioned that how agroforestry still sits on a no man's land in between departments. So it's in between agriculture and in between forestry, and this can create a lot of fragmented application and also uncertainty and uneven uptake, especially to the regions and how they define agroforestry and so on. And of course, this has to do with the uncertainty of these regulations. What we see from farmers is that because these certifications and regulations are currently constant changing and they appear to be quite volatile, farmers are afraid of losing their eligibility and sometimes afraid of registering and applying for these subsidies. In terms of harmonization issues, I think it's what also Jerry mentioned with the current CAP reform. This debate of commonality against, or as we want to say, commonality and flexibility. So we know that regions and countries throughout the EU, they're quite different. But how can we still balance the single market commonality component with the regional diversity? This remains quite a conflict and critical to think. And let's not forget also about land tenure, land distribution, because we know that size and maturity and long-term access to land matters a lot. This is what we have been receiving from farmers on the field. And administrative burden also has to do with the idea that even though the efforts on the simplification seen by the omnibus and the competitive agendas, from the farmer's perspective, still appears to be quite a huge barrier. Now moving to, in terms of finance investment, we'll explore this a lot on the second panel. But overall, we know that there is still a quite huge investment gap and finance gap. Farmers, on average, at least from the ones that we were connected on our living labs, and what we see on literature is that, especially the smaller farmers, they still rely a lot on subsidies, and we know that this is not sustainable in the long term. We like to see other stacking financing options, more type of fundings, payments, and revenue streams for farmers, for them to have a more diversified funding portfolio. So this dependency on subsidies is still quite a strong financial barrier. And undervaluation of ecosystem services, of course, the mainstream financing models and predictions that we use, they fail to account for the full potential of agroforestry in terms of co-benefits, the resilience factors, and also this risk resilience indicators that I'm sure we will explore a lot on the second panel with Martin moderating. There's of course a high risk and cost perception from not just for farmers but from the whole investment and financial sector players. And they still have this perception of bioeconomy and blue economy being extremely risky, and we want to we're trying to change this perception by putting out there incentive mechanisms and de-risking tools that could be accessible for farmers, and we would like to highlight how these ecosystem services, through their regulating ecosystems and resilience, in theory, if we compare in the long term, we'll see that agroforestry is quite less riskier because it's less susceptible to extreme events, everything that we know. And then on the knowledge and innovation gaps, I would like to highlight that, yeah, on average, if I'm not wrong, average age for farmers in Europe is around 55 years old, and we are experiencing this demographic change. So I think It's very important to invest on capacity building, upskilling, and have the younger farmers also involved in this transition. And we know also that farmers are not necessarily all connected to advisory and support. This is something that ReForest has been also, there's a working group, work package specifically to advisory services, and we have conducted surveys and interviews. We noticed that this was a quite huge barrier, together with the MRV costs, the skill disparities, and different incentive present there. With that said, this was like a summary of the main barriers that we have identified. And this week, early this week, we have delivered a policy note that was co-authored by me, EMEA's president, Rimayadi, and ReForest coordinator Martin Lukács. We try to summarize all these learnings and propose preliminary high-level policy recommendations, and also take into account this very important moment of the new CEP discussions. There's a QR code for you to read the full report. But well, we're identifying these attention points rather than concrete target recommendations. So it's quite what we've seen is it's very important to strengthen the governance and regulatory frameworks, everything that was already covered by EURAF. Expand the financial support mechanisms. This is what I was mentioning on moving from subsidy reliance into blended finance options and improve the portfolio and having more diversified funding streams for farmers in terms of upfront action and results-based payments. Provide, and I think this is quite important, a targeted transition funding for farmers. I think on the new CEP post-2027 agenda, it's mentioned the new transition fund, which we are not yet clear what it will mean, but I think is what they are trying to put in practice. Develop long-term financing instruments adapted to agroforestry. And within our project, we have developed a financial scheme, and we also connected to digital tools and predictive tools that try to incorporate the full value of agroforestry in terms of in financial terms. So this has to do with expanding the financial support mechanisms. Develop ecosystem service markets. We see that it's important to keep expanding the carbon farming frameworks, but let's not forget that about the carbon funnel vision, and also expand on the whole nature credit approach, right? Investing in digital infrastructure, it's key, and we are also experiencing this through the AI transition. So this means developing and scaling digital MRV tools, expanding satellite monitoring, remote sensing capabilities, and have subsidized or more accessible options for farmers to have this type of technology on the field. And last point here as a tension, it's to keep strengthening research and knowledge transfer. I think the two projects that are hosting today, it's a very good successful case study of this, and we see that it's important to keep investing in research, innovation, and knowledge transfer. Well, with that said, I'll finish our insights, and please feel free to read the policy note, and I'm happy to join on breaks and for the next panels. Quite excited to follow the discussions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to Martin, Marie, Thiago, and Jerry for this information. We have a lot of food to talk about, a lot to discuss. So without further ado, I will invite the first panelist and the
moderator Constantine Muraro is Secretary General of the European Agroforestry Federation. We also have a board member of the European Environmental Bureau, member of European Economic and Social Committee, and former president of France Nature Environment, Arnaud Schwartz. It is not.
That was not on. Arnaud Schwartz, please welcome, join us. We have the coordinator of Agroforestry Flanders and scientific staff member at Flanders Research Institute for Agriculture, Fishery and Food, Bert Rubens. Environmental Policy Coordinator at the European Commission for DG Agri, Mr. Emmanuel Petel, and Project and Policy Officer from Biodiversity and Carbon Credit, European Landowner Organization, Beatrice Corse. Thanks. Thanks to all of you for joining us today. I'll give the floor to Constantine. Do you have a microphone over there? Yes.
Many thanks, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. So this comes at the right time, just before the coffee break. Hope you're still excited to discuss about policy. Thanks, Jerry, for speaking only 5 minutes more than the allocated time. We'll manage to go through some interesting subjects now with a panel that brings lots of knowledge from different angles. And what I would try to build again in a complementary way would be this perspective from a regional or local approach all the way to an EU perspective. And as always, right, I think it's also useful to engage with you as the audience. We will also make sure we have a bit of time for questions and answers. So please raise your hand whenever you have some uncertainties. And if you have questions about Jerry's slides, you may email him directly. So Bert, maybe from a regional standpoint, I'm very curious to know how you would assess the success story in Flanders, because again, you've published lots of documents covering agroforestry, and you work closely with the authorities. To what extent can maybe the Flemish story be an inspiration for other member states?
Thank you, Constantine. Well, some of the colleagues with whom I'm collaborating in terms of policy are just here in front of me from the Agency of Agriculture, so I have to watch out what I'm saying, I think. No, just to go back a bit in time, we started working on agroforestry in 2011, more or less. That's also when the subsidy intervention was implemented in Flanders. And it was not my plan in the beginning to deal with policy too much. We were interested to dive into research on agroforestry, empirical research, collaborate with farmers, guide farmers, but quite soon it became clear that the implementation in practice is quite strongly determined by a stimulating environment, and stimulating policy is very important in that respect. So soon it became clear that there are, I'm not going to repeat because what was presented before at European level really also counts for Belgium. There are some barriers. There's the administrative burden, there's fragmentation of policy, or there was at least in the very beginning. So quite soon we started interacting directly with the policy level, so the Flemish level, mainly the people from the Agency of Agriculture and the Agency of Nature and Forests, and try to build bridges between what we noticed in practice that are barriers and what could be solutions. It has been maybe a bit a bumpy road with ups and downs, but yes, from my perspective, it's quite a successful story, because from the very beginning and up to now, what I noticed is at least the willingness to change things for the good, and the willingness to listen and to see what are issues in practice. That doesn't mean that it's always easy to change things. It's often a long process, even the smallest changes in terms of conditions or criteria. It's often a long process to get things changed. It can be politically blocked also, so it's not always a success story. But this willingness is very important, and what is recently, in my perspective, a very promising next step is that we managed to establish a cross-policy domain working group with the policy actors on agroforestry, where we build up a kind of action plan of issues to tackle still, and with different representatives from these different policy domains, bringing these people together and like coming out of the silos and the fragmentation is a promising step forward, I think, to go towards solutions.
Yeah, excellent. And if I may, I'd be curious to know from a landowner's perspective, as we have Beatrice Croce representing the European Landowners Organization. What's your assessment of the policy challenges presented already and the testimony of Bert, for example?
The microphone. There are a lot of policy challenges that are facing like landowners, farmers, foresters, agroforesters, forest owners, the land managers, and each category face same but different challenges indeed. And it's actually agroforestry. It's one of them. Like when we are speaking, as we already said, Jerry, Marie, Tiago from all the projects, there is a lot of benefits from agroforestry, but at the same time, a limited uptake of it, especially right now and in the past and right now. And more than, I think, a technical issue, it reflects some of the structural challenges on like how the policies are currently designed and concretely implemented. And this is also coming from a critical moment because European agriculture is increasingly asked to deliver on multiple objectives at the same time. So we have the food production, the climate mitigation, the biodiversity restoration, the resilience, and the extreme weather events. And agroforestry is one of the few approaches that can contribute to all of these objectives simultaneously. But despite its potential, the uptake remains a bit limited. And we saw it in some of the figures from the past, because, for example, if we saw the period of 2014-2022, less than 5,000 hectares were implemented out of 80,000 that were programmed for agroforestry. And a similar pattern is something that we can see also in the current times, in the period of 2023-2027, because agroforestry, even if it's not supported, and of course it's an important step forward for this. It's in the reality that in only almost 10 member states that we have in Europe, is really supported on the fields, but with limited budgets. And for example, one of the countries, of course, Belgium, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, the Czech Republic, that have included agroforestry-related measures in their CEPS strategic plans, even if it still needs to be more implemented. The emphasis and the interest around agroforestry for farmers, of course, is growing because there is an awareness, an increasingly awareness of benefits that, as was mentioned before and found in the European project, the benefits that is bringing in terms of soil health, the water retention, the climate resilience, the diversification also of incomes for a farm. And in many regions, farmers are already experimenting with the tree-based system with a strong policy support. But the challenge is not, I think, about the willingness, but also more about creating the right enabling condition for the implementation. And some of the challenges that farmers are experiencing is related to the fragmentation of the policy frameworks, because agroforestry is inherently an integrated system, but the policy generally are remaining largely structured
along the sectoral lines. So we have the policy for agriculture, the forestry, the climate, and the biodiversity, and can create for a farmer a difficult to position agroforestry clearly with the existing frameworks. Because like, for example, if a farmer that plants a tree, he needs to navigate in agricultural rules for the income support, the forestry regulation for the tree management, and the environmental scheme for the biodiversity. And these frameworks are not always aligned, so they need like a coordination between these policies, not to create conflicts, but to create an harmonization of the measure. A second factor is related to the economic incentives, for example, because agroforestry typically involves upfront investment, but long-term returns. So a farmer that is planting a tree today may only see a significant economic return decades later of the initial investment. So farm decisions are made generally on a shorter time, and to because they need to manage their cash flows, their input cost, the market volatility. While the CEP provides the support for the establishment of the agroforestry, there is often limited support during the transition phase, and that's create a gap between the immediate effect and the delayed benefits for the future. For example, a farmer that is considering a like cropping may need to reduce the short-term production in order to establish the tree rows, but without an adequate compensation during that transition, the economic case becomes really difficult, even if the long-term benefits are clear for the future. Another aspect could be regarding the eligibility rules, because in some cases agricultural land is defined for support purpose, can create uncertainty when integrating trees. This uncertainty, even if the small risk of losing basic income support, can discourage the investment for the farmers. There is also, I think, the administrative complexity, because there are a lot of detailed requirements, controls, varying interpretation across the regions, and this is particularly challenging for the practices like agroforestry, because they don't fix neatly in two existing categories, but it's a category apart. Also, administrative complexities can be created by the land tenure, because a significant share of the agricultural land in Europe is rented and not owned. So in many cases, a tree planted on that land are considered the property of the landowner rather than the tenant. So there can be created a misalignment of incentives, because the tenant bears the cost and the effort of the planting of the trees, but not benefit from them in longer term. Another factor could be the how the environmental policies can be implemented, because at the European level we have a strong ambition through the Green Deal, the biodiversity strategies, the climate targets, and even if we consider agroforestry as a key solution within all of these frameworks, at farm level, all of these objectives are not always translated into sufficiently clear and stable incentives. Sometimes there is a gap between what is an environmental ambition and an economic reality. Because when a farmer is expected to deliver, for example, carbon sequestration, biodiversity, landscape management, we need a mechanism to reward these services that are still evolving, because it's still not enough the incentives they received, but not only for the first investment, but for the maintenance of the agroforestry project through the years. So even if agroforestry has a really strong potential to generate the carbon credits, it can also contribute to the biodiversity outcomes. These markets needs to evolve. To create and provide an additional long-term revenue stream to help make agroforestry more economically viable. Also, like final consideration I would like to do is regarding the broader systemic dimension that is linked to the evolution of the European budget. Because with the proposed national and regional partnership for the 2028-2034 period, we have a clear opportunity to move towards a more integrated planning that can bring together agriculture, climate, and regional development. At the same time, it also introduces a new dynamic because agricultural and rural development can increasingly compete with the other policy priorities within a single funding framework. And especially for agroforestry, which requires a long-term and stable investment, this can create both an opportunity and a risk. Of course, the opportunity is clear because it's a better integration, but the risk could be the reduced prioritization. And I think putting together all these things, the picture is become a bit clear because it seems like the policy gap is not due to a lack of knowledge because we have the knowledge about all the benefits and we have the knowledge of the policy, but sometimes a lack of the solution. And a lack of interest from the farmers themselves, because to increase the interest, farmers are really concrete and pragmatic person. You need to give them alignment and coordination. You need to align the policy objectives with the economic realities that they face, the short-term support with the long-term investment, the environmental ambition and the practical implementation on the ground. And to be ready to engage and contribute in this transition, we need a framework that is coherent across the policy areas, that reduce the uncertainty and the risk for the farmers, that can support the long-term investment choices for them, and can create a real economic value for the ecosystem service that the land manager, farmers, agroforests, etc. can provide. In a way that we will put them, that are the main actors to develop agroforestry on their land, in a way they can make agroforestry scale up and create a system that is more resilient and sustainable for the land use.
Great, wonderful. Thanks a lot, Beatrice. So you've covered lots of topics, and I saw Arnaud next to me nodding in several occasions. As you mentioned that farmers are pragmatic persons, Arnaud is also a very pragmatic person whose day has 30 hours. As among others, he also manages a nursery, right? And is involved in one of the French agroforestry associations. What's your take on the challenges mentioned, Arnaud?
Really, thank you for having me here today and organizing this event. The two projects who are the basis for our gathering are really interesting. I believe they are just strengthening all the messages we can share and building on the knowledge we already have. Of course, we can always push forward, but what we really need now is more action, scaling up, and the main barrier. I'm a farmer. I'm not only a tree nurseryman, organic no-till farmer. I was still planting trees yesterday morning, and what I need, yes, is really what you were saying. I need to know if when I give this piece of my field to the trees and the hedges, what I will not produce there for 10 years, let's say, which will not give me some money, I will get back in a way or another. And who gives me this in between? Right now, there are not many options. And I believe if we want to scale up or to convince landowners like farmers, we need to find a solution to this part of the problem. Because organic farmers or those who have some cattle outside on the green, they can understand. They can make sometimes the investment without, or they can wait some years, but others who are really tight on the line economically, they cannot. And we need to find something out there. But I also believe, because you were talking about the fact that I'm also active in Réseau Hay France and Réseau Hay Grand Est, or locally in my region. So these kind of networks who are members of EURAF, and of course I'm a volunteer in Alsace Nature, France Nature Environnement, which are part of the EEB, the European Environmental Bureau, which I'm representing in the EESC, the European Economic and Social Committee here in Brussels. You know, all this ecosystem of actors looking at nature or agriculture, agroforestry, they work hand in hand, they are complementary. And what we are feeling is, for the next period, we really need a collective push, not only on European level, but also from bottom up, speaking with local authorities, mayors, regional politicians, because they will be a part of the decision making related to the future of CAP. The way is still not really clear. It's negotiated between Parliament, Council, and Commission, but we already feel that more free range will be given to member states and regions, and also local stakeholders. So we have to take our part into this discussion, not waiting to be invited. We must ask for, we must organize, we must connect, and so level up the cultural habits or lust for trees in the fields. Because not only some rules on European levels will help us. The risk is out there. You said it. This is also really important take I could keep in mind is when you have only one fund for the next period, then it's a competition between, I don't know which kind of industrial politic and some, for many people, not for us, tiny aspect of what agriculture should look like tomorrow. So it will be really, really tough if Europe follows this path of simplifying too much the budget, because the competition will be hard with shrinking money out there. The ESC, in the opinion you can find online, I won't sum it up, about the future of CAP I've worked on, is first saying, of course, because there we are sitting together, employers, trade unionists, and other kind of stakeholders like farmers, environmentalists, etc., still first saying the shrinking of the budget is not okay. We would even need more for all what is expected from farmers. Biodiversity, climate, resilience, food, etc. So there's a big challenge ahead.
Yep, thanks a lot, Arnaud. So Emmanuel, is Arnaud right in saying that people in EURAF might have to look for another job because lobbying at EU level will no longer be relevant and most of the lobby will be done nationally? What should we expect from the next CAP?
Anyway, I think there is no, maybe there is some fragmentation, as you said, because you have the feeling there is different agenda in different places in Commission. But if we consider the different policy and the different strategy, I think there is a common view and a common sense to achieve something, because I think now, I think there is no more, maybe at a political level in some forum there is still discussion, but for the concrete term, where we are faced some challenge and some threats, as Jerry mentioned, and there is no place for discussion. We need to act, I think. And for me, there is no contradiction between climate mitigation and carbon removal framework, or climate adaptation strategy, or climate water resilience strategy. Is a common view to go in the sense we need to preserve the resource and to use what we have as today, but there will be limitation, and some says how to share and how to use in convenient way the resources. And I think agroforestry is in good place to go to address this challenge. Just, in fact, yes, until now, there was a big discussion between stakeholders, and there was sometimes binary approach, okay, competitiveness and nature in another way, but I think both are combined, because how could be farmer be competitive without taking account the soil health, or taking account some water scarcity? You need to work with that in daily life. Donc, that means, we are there for that, and for me there is a common view. But at some stage, yes, there was a lot of discussion until now about the standards, the regulation, the mandatory requirement, and how to improve. I mean, in fact, we spend a lot of energy on that. And we waste energy, is my view, because at some stage we discuss on some key standard, minimum standard, and we spend a lot of time about that, but it's not the issue. In the CEP we will keep some key standard. The key requirement is a farm stewardship. We try to find another way to say the conditionality, but we'll be stay here, okay? But at some stage, it's not drama. It's just how to apply some basic practices, and it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient to go in to address some key objectives. Donc that means we need to find other way and incentivize farmer to go in a good direction. And here, as what is mentioned, we cannot work alone at Commission level, at Brussels level, whatever the name from member state. But we need is a share management. Our policy is a share management. I mean, we need to have some leverage at member state level. And today we start again to engage a discussion with member state about the future of the CEP. And we start what we have done before 22, but we will work on recommendation. But what does it mean, recommendation? Okay, some people will say is binding or non-binding recommendation. Okay, there is such discussion, but with member state, it's just to assess the situation and to see what is a priority today in your member state faced on the environmental issue. And always the same. We have always the same indicators on water quality, but there is as well this LULUCF, donc this possibility for carbon removal in the soil. And we have some figures, but sometimes it's difficult to interpret, but it is a key element. And in fact, agroforestry in this, it will be in this direction. Donc that means we are discussing a concrete issue with member state, and after to set what is a priority. And in the CAP, anyway, above this basic standard in a farm stewardship, we want to we want to address some priority, and we put some priority in the list of the regulation, and the priority is clear. And I will not repeat by heart what is a priority, but there is soil health, climate mitigation, climate adaptation, soil water pollution. Donc we put that, and member states say, okay, the one priority, another one. We have flexibility, but at some stage, I don't know where will be flexibility, but farmers need to survive. Donc that means there is a priority, and in true, we try to little bit simplify the instrument in the sense Today, there was two components. One component, it was a famous eco scheme. Another component was agro-environmental commitment in rural development. We say now we will have the same wording for both, and we will have one element for that. And inside of this element, yes, we consider maybe to be more creative, because today we try to compensate farmer when he wants to uptake some good practices, and is more based on the means, based on the action. And besides of that, we want to promote a transitional scheme, transitional payment. It will be still a discussion with member states how to define this transitional payment. But the idea, yes, is to have more flexibility at the farm level and to consider the situation at the farm and how to move during 5-6 years towards sustainable scheme. And at some stage, it could be organic farming, it could be other holistic approach, agroforestry, it could be as well conservation agriculture, regenerative agriculture, whatever the name. Farmer wants to achieve something after 6-7 years. And for us, yes, it will be a challenge because we need to be creative at member state level. We could not define something here, a scheme at EU level in such. We can, but we have experience. Before 22, we have experience with the greening, and it was only 3 main practices, and we need to have that in direct payment to support 3 main practices. And at some stage, we need to define what is the 3 main practices, and we spend a lot of time to define something in delegate act, in the regulation, what is an ecological focus area, what is energies, what is trees at EU level. We don't want to spend again this time, because each time we know the argument, people will come, no, trees is like that in my country, trees is another way. So at some stage, we want to let the room a member state. But yes, as you mentioned, there is a need to have a governance at member state level, and we have already this provision in the current CEP to associate stakeholders as soon as you design a CEP plan. Now, okay, it will be national partnership plan, and you need to come back on a new plan, more a comprehensive plan, but you need to have a discussion at regional level and to associate stakeholders. And I know some member states are more reluctant because it will be, okay, it will raise some issue. You need to organize consultation, and you need to take on board different ideas, and it's not so easy. But I think it's the way we have to work. And because I know in some member states there is one farmer union and there is only one vision. But today we need to take on board different initiatives, positive initiative, and in each member state there is positive initiative, there is positive experience with some farmer, and we need to take on board this experience from good. I don't want to say good farmer, but innovative farmer, and there is some potential behind that.
Excellent, thanks a lot. So I have to translate my CV into Flemish and send it to Bert, hoping that there'll be a vacancy in Ilvo at one point. Creativity at member state level. Lots of colleagues from the EURAF membership in the room. Do you have questions, or do you have examples of good practices colleagues could suggest to their authorities?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm Joris Haarsens from Flanders. I work at the Agency of Agriculture and Sea Fisheries. Maybe a question for clarification to Emmanuel Petel. So I think you open up the possibility, well, in Flanders, if a farmer invests in agroforestry, at this moment we can pay him back 75% of the investment in the trees. But there would be, if I hear you, also the possibility to maybe finance in a transition period of 5 to maybe some more years for the yield losses that he would have. And if I hear you, this is now a big limitation for the upscaling, so that would be really interesting, but so we would have to defend this at Flemish level, and then you may accept this at the European Commission. But it's still a bit uncertain.
Yeah, because you want to say there is a support for investment as regards the payment for planting trees, and at some stage there is as well another component on the compensation for loss of.
If you plant trees on an arable land, your production of the crops will go down. So can we compensate the farmers in the next cap for this yield loss in a transition period?
Normal, yes, the idea is we have to maybe after discuss more in detail, but the idea is to go in this direction, because we in the transition payment is just we assume farmer will take a risk and he will maybe at some stage lose some revenue during a period, and we are there to compensate this fact. And in fact, yes, he could have some help for establishment of trees, but he could have some help for maintenance of the trees during the first period of growing. He could have some advice as well from some association. If there is agroforestry association, we could have a package for farmer to go in this direction. I know it's a little bit more complicated to have different elements in the same scheme, but it's just an idea to have a more integrated scheme.
Yeah. Because I think it was you that referred to it for organic production. You also have a transition period of 2 years for conversion. Yeah, it could be a similar system then. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, indeed. Yes, the idea is there.
Thank you. We have another question over there. We have some questions online as well.
Hello, hi. My name is Pinaz. I'm representing the Land Banking Group. I wanted to ask if in the next phase of the CAP, is there a potential consideration of payment of ecosystem services? So currently, most of the compensation is subsidized based on practices, which is definitely something we should do. But the farmers are providing not only food, but they're also providing flood resilience or resilience against fires. Is there a substantial conversation happening at the European Union level to compensate them for that?
It's a part of the debates. I think some is always under reflection and under some debate, because we need to have a certainty when you want to pay the farmer, and when you address, you spot some action. Okay, farmer know in which direction he has to go. Even in the transition payment, we want to be more flexible and to maybe to let farmer to use a different action, not only one action, and maybe not to define the good world journeys. I mean, you need to plant trees at some date and to have some specific calendar. I think we will not go in this direction, but you need to know in which action he has to do. But when we introduce the outcome based, that means we need to evaluate and we need to measure this outcome at some stage. That means we need to be to have some indicators, but each time when we talk about indicator, there is a cell how to measure indicators, and the indicator sometimes can change depending on the situation, depending on the weather, whatever. So it could be subject to some discussion. So that means there is a risk after for the payment, because depending on the administration could be black and white and say, okay, there is no outcome, I don't want to discuss with you, and you will not get any payment. That means we need to go in this direction, but we need to find some way how to design the indicators. And even scientifically, sometimes there is different option, but at some stage we need to be clear on that, because we are talking about payment.
So just a quick follow-up from Arlo, and we have another question right in the back. Yeah, thank you, because there's a de-risking aspect for the farmer. If, I don't know, a war, climate extreme event or whatever would destroy the action and the outcome that should have been noticed What if?
As the reason where, after it's not fixed, but there is in discussion hybrid situation when you can give money first for action, and maybe at the end you can give a top up to finalize the contract.
So like in Horizon projects, first installment and then a follow up. Good, great, thanks. And there was another question in the back, right? So Andrea, yeah. Is it working? Maybe check. Yeah, great.
You asked for good examples, and I would like to mention that in the 1960s in Hungary, there was a nationwide project on establishing shelter beds.
Okay, thanks. Shelter beds and windbreaks, whole systems of them. And it was not just about establishing, but also measuring the effect of these systems. And so we have a huge amount of evidence that these systems has very positive effect on the yield. So today I think that we need to raise the attention to the fact that this positive effect is there, and although the farmers lose some area of crop production, but at the same time, the trees, the shelter beds, can raise up the profitability and the productivity of the system. This is one thing I would have liked to mention. The other is that many farmers indicated that we need to finance in a long term an agroforestry system. It's not just about maintenance, it's also about preserving the older agroforestry systems. So some of them has 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old systems, and they have no support to maintain those old systems, and therefore they cut the trees. That's a problem as well. So it will be very important to provide support for the old systems as well. Thank you.
I lost my microphone, so I cannot. Yeah, no, actually, it's an excellent example, right? I think driving through Hungary, you can see the vast network of shelter belts, and that's impressive. But coming back to creativity and regional action, right? I was wondering, Bert, I mean, I'm in Belgium for some years already, and I could see the summers getting hotter and the winters getting warmer, right? So our farmers essentially, yeah, today's a bit awkward, right? So are farmers ready to adapt to these rapidly changing conditions when it comes to managing, for example, the agroforestry systems that are on their land, or possibly when it comes to establishing new ones? Should they look at new tree varieties, or what's your experience from a Flemish level? And maybe I think Arno, from a tree nursery perspective, that would also be interesting to hear.
Yes, that kind of questions we're getting more and more frequently from farmers, and we also notice that in the contact with and if we provide farmers advice, or in the network of farmers we are involved in, this awareness is growing, and you see that throughout the 15 years we've been dealing with agroforestry, the motivation for starting with agroforestry has evolved and changes, of course, all the time, but getting ready for a more climate adaptive system is becoming more and more clear, and you see more and more, for example, livestock farmers who want to provide shelter, who want to work with fodder hedges to have some feed supplements in dry periods and so on. So awareness is growing, but things are going far too slow. And maybe I wanted to bring in another aspect a bit in the discussion, and that's, yeah, we can think about a good framework at European level and creative frameworks at member state levels. And I think it's important that there's enough communication between administrations of the different member states to learn from each other, to get inspired from each other. So not only the EU member state relationship, but also in between member states. I think people can learn a lot from each other. But whatever framework we think about, and it's clear also from what Jerry presented that the previous frameworks, however good the intention was, didn't work for agroforestry. The amount of hectares that we realized, the implementation in the field, it's not ambitious enough. We need more and faster getting trees out there. So the EURAF ambition of having 10% tree cover on agricultural land by 2040, we need to accelerate if we want to reach that, and I underline it. But it's more than creating a good framework, I think. And maybe you mentioned Belgium or Flanders as a successful example before, and yes, to some extent, yes, we've been one of the first member states to implement the support measures. I said there's a good connection with the people from the administrations to talk about at least issues. But still, in 15 years, we have realized 250, 300 hectares. That's 0.005 or something percentage of our agricultural area in Flanders where there is a potential. So something is wrong even if the framework is okay. And that's doesn't have to do with the willingness of the individual people trying to change things for the good, but it has to do with all of us being like stuck in a system that somehow is, as Jerry mentioned it, has too many unnecessary, rigid regulatory aspects and too much administration. And whatever framework you think about, it always comes along with a set of rules and criteria, and this fits within the system and this does not fit in the system. And what I notice is that at member state level, there's a great fear for European audits. So if we don't stick exactly to the rules and we give funds to something which is, we see in practice that it works, it's good practice, what the farmer is doing good, but it's just too small the acreage or just too many trees. So yeah, we can't give it, or in a control we need to punish and get the subsidy back because Europe will say that we didn't spend the money as it should be. So we're stuck in like a regulatory system, and what I think is needed is also like a change in that mindset at all levels, more trust in the farmers, giving them freedom to operate, especially the early adopters and the innovators, give them some freedom and trust. And yeah, we don't have enough time to go out of the offices and to see actually what's going on in the field, what's the farmer's reality, how they are working, and we need to get out more. Yeah.
And I know, and I'll get back to you now. It's my turn to steal your microphone. I don't know, sorry about that. As you mentioned about going out in the field and talking to farmers, I know Beatrice and colleagues in EURO are involved in lots of projects. What's your experience, Beatrice, from Climate Farm Demo and other projects when it comes to working more with farmers and making sure their voices are heard in the wider political context?
I think that, thank you. Farmers are the best one to ask what is going on their lands. I just also actually want to add something to what they were saying, Bart and Arnold and Manuel was saying about the measure and the implementation for the climate change that and the implementation that we need to do in the following years, because actually the situation and the risk because of these challenges that are more and more coming for the future is putting the risk particularly on the farm side, on the farmers themselves. When you spoke about the change of weathers, we spoke about the fires, the floods that are affecting the agricultural lands. Almost what we are kind of noticing also during the last years is that some insurances, like, and I give you a concrete example, in Sicily, in Italy, there are some, they are affected, especially during the summer periods, by a lot of fires. And because it's something that became more common through the years, there are some Italian, not only Italian, but insurances that are operating in Sicily that are not insuring the farmers anymore against the fire. So when something like this happened, all the risk is on their heads. Or like, for example, in the northern part of Italy, where I'm coming from, and where is like our family farm located, we have problems with intense floodings, like the ice from the sky. I don't know the English word for that, sorry. Me? Probably, like the ice from the sky. Yeah, hail. Sorry. Grandine in Italian. And the insurances are putting even more and more higher prices for their insurances against these damages, and all of that is of course affecting the head of the farmers in this adaptation in their lands. So sorry, just wanted to add this.
If I may quickly, we have 2 questions online and 1 more in the room. We hear them? Okay. So first question from CISNAT Zeros. Question to Arno and Emmanuel. We are engaged in arable crop production and are about to start establishing an agroforestry system. It will be expensive, but we believe it can improve the climate resilience of our land and help generate degraded areas. However, I have mixed feelings. On the one hand, European regulation are clearly moving toward more sustainable agriculture. On the other hand, I do not feel that the market sufficiently supports the sale of products produced in this way. The European Union is increasingly signing free trade agreements with third countries, such as Mercosur and Australia, allowing cheaper products from less sustainable production systems to enter the market. My question is, if the European Union requires sustainable production from its farmer, why does it not give stronger preference to the marketing of these products? Why does it allow imports from third countries that may not meet the same sustainability standard? So this on sustainability standard and free trade agreement. Now the second question, short one from Jerry to Emmanuel. The question just asked, transition payments are often discussed as lump sum. Example, one-time boost to help pivot a farmer operation. Not sure that repeated installments are intended, but transition payments could be accompanied by annual AECAS as support payments for maintenance and income foregone. AECAS. Annual, Jerry, maybe if you're online, you can give us what you mean by the acronym AECES. Thanks.
And in the meantime, should maybe Arno elaborate on the answer to the first question? Yeah.
And because then Emmanuel can answer the first and the second. So for the first question, I only, because I'm not a commission or I'm only a citizen involved in civil society organizations. And when we are talking about these trade issues in the ESC, what we have, the kind of agreement we can see there is that often the farming activities in Europe are the losers of the deal. Of course, as a whole, Europe often doesn't lose. The deals are designed to be win-win situations. This is the storytelling I can read or hear everywhere, okay? But not taking it into account the externalities, of course, social and environmental ones here and elsewhere. We are still overshooting the planet and the people, okay? But just considering the economical indicators, okay, well, we will sell more chemistry, more cars, or more whatever you want. And these kind of lobbyists, they always win against European farming. So this is what we see, what we have in the discussion in the ESC, but we may be wrong. So I stop here and Emmanuel will explain you maybe something else. But really, definitively, we always ask for more defense. We want Europe not only to progress, to heighten our social and environmental standards in relation with the science. Okay, no, we do not only need that, we only need to defend those standards against unfair competition.
I will not intervene because it's a very, I think, hot topic and cannot speak in behalf of the Commission because you expressed the view about the deal and to have a partnership with other continents, and I think it's part of the geopolitical discussion. And we try to, at some stage, for organic to have equivalence rule and to check if the producer in Australia produce organic, he has the same say equivalent rule as EU. So there is as well some rule at import level, and we need maybe to reinforce our control at import level about to know what is the quality of the product, and after is the transparency for the consumer. We need to be transparent and to show what is the difference between what is coming from outside and what is the internal. After, okay, what is the competitiveness? Because at some stage, after is a more personal view, but the climate change has no, I would say, targeted area. It will act everywhere. And our competitor will be faced to the same challenge, maybe not sometime, but it depends the year and the 1 year. But at some stage, maybe we have a good reason to be more autonomous and to be more resilient. And okay, the resilience as a beginning costs something, the cost, and we are less competitive on the market, but at some stage we are more in good shape face to the next challenge. Is a way to we have to communicate. As regards the audit, is a long story because maybe normally in a new CEP we let maybe auditor to look at the general governance at member state level, how member state organize the control. I don't know if they will go again on the spot. I need to know with the auditors. But just to come back after is always the same consideration for myself. But to come back before I don't know 22, agroforestry was not recognized at all in a CEP. There was no definition. Even Jerry said there is different definition. In the past, there was no definition. And it was a very exotic element for auditors. And when I was before 22, in fact, the edges and trees are there to preempt production. There is no connection between trees and edges and production and productivity. It's just an enemy. That means we need to control the parcel to see if there is a clean parcel without edges. And if edges there, okay, there was a rule, maybe 2 meters, not more. And after, okay, if more 2 meters, it was a drama with auditors. And just to come back, maybe 6 years, 7 years ago, it was like that. Now, okay, the mindset has a little bit changed and are more open, and is still in the regulation in nature restoration, regional partnership regulation. I look again. There is a definition, and there is a possibility to recognize to have a definition for agroforestry, and there is a possibility to recognize a landscape feature. Because it was not so clear in the past. Some member states have the freedom to say landscape feature in the parcel are eligible, even whatever the size, and we will not intervene. But after now, yes, there's a room for member state to allow that. But
great, thanks. So in other words, the conditions are much more favorable than they used to be in the past, right? So I'm aware we're running out of time, and I think people are looking forward to a coffee. I would rather take some questions from the room if there's anything else, or
Sure.
Are there any other questions on the
Just the clarification of the acronym. Jerry was recommending whether the transition payment could be accompanied by annual agri-environment climate action, which is the new agri-environment climate measures. So that was his recommendation.
And maybe that will be in the written summary of the minutes of this discussion we send to colleagues in DG Agri. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jerry. Any other questions, burning questions before the coffee break?
Over there.
Thank you very much. Yes. So, Ms. Ioannis Varvaris from the AfroGrow project, just as having inspiring from the title about leveraging the national and regional partnership, I think something that we could integrate in our projects could be the local aspect. And this should come from the living labs perspective, meaning that, the role of the living labs, and particularly for the agroforestry systems, will be likely to take over all the different, let's say, risks from the farmers, let's say, reduce them, and then provide back to the farmers analyzed, ready to be used management practice without risks. And at the same time, maybe as well to provide the data that can be supporting for the development of the digital twins, that certainly will come a role in regards to the forecasting aspect, and especially for the climatic conditions maybe as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Ioannis. Any reactions to what Ioannis said? Involved in a farm-to-fork project on EU-AU collaboration?
Anyway, Susanna was there. We are encouraging today in a different way in Horizon Europe or in agroecology partnership. In Soil Mission, we are encouraged a lot living lab because we are convinced we need to go on the spot to have a good demonstration and to after to show that at the farm level in a concrete term. Not is obvious for us. We have to disseminate. And we have a EU CEP network as well, is an instrument, and there is a European Innovation Partnership, and there is a focus group, operational group. It's just at some stage up to member state to organize and to put the money on the table, but to have some meeting between farmers to have exchange of experience. And it's possible, it would, each time there is a topic to put in the table, and agroforestry could be a topic, and to have exchange even between member state or inside of member state.
Should we close now? And maybe before that, I'll give the microphone to the speakers for some concluding remarks in 2 words, maybe 3 words, not more than that. What's your take from this discussion? What should we tell our mayors? I don't know, in 2 words.
Native seeds. 2, huh? Okay. What could be this? Maybe others as well, because it's the one answer is not easy for the question about the future. What we would need already now, we would need them already now, with the weeks with 30 degrees and peaks with 40 degrees. These hedges, these tree rows, etc. Be it for timber or fruit production, whatever. But okay, and the science is still unclear. We still don't know what really will happen. So we should not exclude the one or the others, I believe, as a personal point of view. This is what I would tell the mayor if he would ask me, what should I do now?
Great, thanks.
Thank you. As Arno took more than 2 words, I will do the same. Maybe one last thought is that why I think it's so important to try and find a stimulating environment for agroforestry and deal with regulatory issues and so on, is that for me it also represents a bigger system. If we're talking about transition or transformation payment, it's transformation towards more agroecological, real agroecological shift, and shifts towards farming within the context of planetary boundaries, so reducing resource use, energy use, and so on, and working towards autonomy on the farm. And I think a lot of farms who are working on that in different ways, by diversifying or whatever, you call it regenerative farming, whatever 100 names exist, I think that the kind of issues these farmers are facing are similar. And agroforestry is a tangible, concrete farming system, and I think if we tackle the issues of this system, it can be like a kind of ambassador way of working for other farming systems, for which the regulation actually is often not made, because it's often made for specialized, bigger farming systems. So, yeah.
Thank you. I think that After this conversation, what also came out is that the collaboration with the parties is the keys, because like the policies needs to learn from the farmers and vice versa, the farmers from the policies. And actually, what is the work that the projects that it's exactly that. Like, for example, I'm involved in, as you mentioned, DigitAF, Climate Farm Demo, and in landship with Ioannis. And the big part of the job of this project indeed is merging these two realities, so experimenting what are the policies into the living labs and the land per se, and giving back feedbacks that can be used by the policy to create and to implement new regulation. So I think like collaboration.
Excellent, great, thanks a lot, and last but not least, Manuel.
Yes, I think we need to have a common understanding between the stakeholders, and as such, we need to go as a farmer to provide him background, and as I said, you need to have an accessible background, because, and for me, research is good to explore and to go for the step, but for the farmer, he need to have a key element in the end, and to understand, not to complicate and to put everything on the table. We need to have some certainty about some scientific background, and at some stage he will be able to be convinced. And at some stage, yes, it's just to preserve the natural resources, but preservation is not for the society itself. It's just to preserve the capacity of production of the farmer. It's a key element for him.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Manuel. This being said, looks like I have lots of substance to cover during the coffee break. So please join me in thanking the panelists and colleagues who posed questions as well. Over to you, Christina, right? Coffee is here?
Yes, coffee downstairs,
yeah.
And we're back at 4:30 for the second policy dialogue on finance. Please stay with us.
Thanks a lot, everyone. All the best. Yeah, so it was a bit rushed, right? But I think lots of ideas to cover, right? So
it's always a bit rushing with this kind of panel discussion. Once you get warming up.
But I think it was more interesting than many panels I could attend to, because he was not strict, you know, and so
there was a bit of flexibility.
It was easier to enrich and to. It was a real dialogue between all of us. It's not.
I'm not paid as a moderator, right? That's why. So if I would be paid, I would have been stricter.
Maybe, but it has made the discussion real.
Because of course.
Because often moderators
are complementary, right? That's why.
Great. And
thanks a lot.
By the way, we still will need very much EURAF.
Really? Okay, good.
Because you were kidding.
Sure. I was joking. Right?
Okay, but we really need you.
Even more, I think.
Yeah. Sure.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Well, good job. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you too. By the way,
so you come from France? You're farming also?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And so I heard about we plant. Did we hear about this? It was in
Wallonia. Yeah. The hedges, 4,000 kilometers.
I don't know. And did you have also this kind of global regional policy when you were talking about it before? It seemed the frame was really interesting also in your region.
Yes, but it's different. That's a bit of a special situation in Belgium, that we are even 2 member states. Such a small country, and we are 2 member states. So we try to, and even also with the partners from the Netherlands, we try to bridge borders and work together and inspire each other. Yeah. But rules are different, and I think in the end, for the farmer, for example, the support for implementing agroforestry is quite comparable in Flanders and in Wallonia, but the background and where the means come from, it's completely different. Yeah. In Wallonia, it's state support. In Belgium, it's an implementation of a European measure, but in Flanders, it's an implementation of a European measure.
The flows are not the
Yeah,
same,
the
but
flows are not the same, but
the aim
we
is
try to,
similar.
yeah, the aim is similar. And I think Wallonia is often looking to what's happening in France.
Yeah, surely because of language, it's
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
Just in case I give you contact card, because this is the farm and the tree nursery. If you want to have a look at the website, what we are offering, this is the more wide in here in Brussels.
Okay, so you are representing EEB then, or
France Nature Environment, which I'm representing, because the ESC is based on national delegations.
Okay.
So I'm representing France Nature Environment, which indeed is a
member of EEB.
where
Okay.
I'm also active.
We had some contact with people who are located in Brussels for EEB. I forgot the name, it's a couple of years ago. But I think also in future projects it would be very interesting to collaborate with you. Okay, thank you.
In Belgium or in Lithuania, in Belgium, I
don't have a business card, but I can get in touch with you.
I can maybe find your map and
in fact,
it's clear to get.
Yes, we are here.
In a couple of weeks, we have EURAF people visiting our agroforestry fields. So I don't know if you are in touch with EURAF.
Yeah, we are here. But I have the same thing. I checked it because it was my reaction. I am a farmer again. I'm not against, but
I don't want to buy my tender. I've been trying to find a
okay. Within the water, is there like a center of expertise for climate, agriculture and climate? That's also support, but it's quite a big industry, so it's agroforestry is a tiny part of it.
I don't know, it's not bad after how far we go and what we did.
I'm staying for a moment.
Yeah, my business card with my company. I would like to see if there's going to be
Yeah, so okay. So last year from March to
I went one time for Milano with I did it from lobby again
I'm just. Okay, I'm living in City a long time ago, but
one thing that I propose like
and then last year indeed I which was okay. Spring I did another good trip to 4 or 5 days working each time. We passed through Belgium first and Luxembourg, which crosses the Rhine from north to south, along the German and the Italian border. And in July I crossed the Alps 1 month, backpacking tents, from the Lake of Geneva to
something I'm trying to do. I have a colleague who did that this summer in the Pyrenees mountains. Not following the path, but trying to follow the rest. You were alone, right?
I was alone. My wife joined for a couple of days. I had some friends joining at the end. For the rest, I was alone. It means that you are never alone. If you want to be alone, you are alone. But if you want to have company, there are plenty of people doing that. Yeah, if you want to be alone, so you meet another people and then you decide, okay, they nice people to have conversations with, or not have the same pace. Yeah, it was great. And I started at GR5, and then along the trip you meet people who say, there are a lot of deviations and variations. This one is nice, and then you should go. Normally it goes to Nice, but everybody said, no, let's go to Nice. The last 4 days are romantic too much. We should go to Moldova, and you have the and Valide Café. I probably know this place.
I know the name, the place I've never been there, but of course I heard about it. Is it really marvelous and the name is nice?
Marvelous refers to
marvelous or the climate change and the glaciers disappearing? It's
the most beautiful part of the Alps I crossed was close to Mexico in what do you call La Valvase.
I've been there and I was very disappointed because I went there during 3 days. It was 50 people. I was imagining myself lost in the mountains. It was just a one-day trip. But
it depends on that's for example one spot where you have a lot of different paths you can follow and where I got good advice of where I should go to be not really around isolated in the desert. So that's a very beautiful part. La Vallée de Merveille is more the Merveille refers not to marble but to like fantasy. And it has to do with the fact that it's a very rough landscape effect. It's very just stones with a lot of iron, and it seems like almost all the time there's lightning there. And apparently in the past it was like sacred place where the goddess of the earth met the gods of the rising, and where people came to in the rocks make all kind of markings and signs. It's full of drawings, very so that's it's a really protected area. You cannot use sticks. Damage the stones. Sometimes you really look to see them, but they are like 50 and so the marvel refers to the fantasy and the goddess. But that strip is nice because if you end it in Montreux, the last few are high mountains. Yeah, and then it's steep down. But like the first moment, it's like 2 or 3 days before arriving in Montreux for the first time, you see the Mediterranean. It's great. Yeah, yeah. That's a special feeling. Then you see everybody taking some rest and yeah. But then when I arrived on the beach, I felt not fitting in the context with all the people on the beach and I with my probably smelling a bit from another world. And it took me, because then the rest of the family came there and we spent holidays in France. But it was challenging for me. It was too much noise, too much light, too much people. Yeah, after a month being isolated a bit and just surrounded by nature and silence, yeah, it took me some time. Yeah. Yeah. In the Vanoise? Okay, I can imagine. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey.
Definities is dat ik denk dat ze wel een keer interessant zijn voor mij om te zien dat ze in andere landen definiëren.
Omdat zij nog veel feller in zitten op ons land.
Maar ook met worstelen blijkbaar ook gerealiseerd worden. Maar dat in Nederland dan bijvoorbeeld kan.
Ze hebben een korte termijn toch?
Unless you want to see under your picture.
You feel it would be more symmetric?
No.
But I don't know where my picture will be.
I don't know either. You can sit there.
I think on the agenda was first. So truly no questions.
Just a topic. So, in the after Mali, what the forest is, we need to make somebody pay. We discuss the topic.
Yeah.
So, for example, today, so I don't know, supermarket, there's a very simple state, today,
Hi, everyone. I hope you had a good coffee break. I'll ask everyone please to take a seat. We are about to start.
Nice to meet you.
I will ask my... So I think we still have a couple of standing people. Okay, great. So thanks everyone for staying with us. We're about to start the second policy dialogue, this time on assessing pathway to integrate innovative financing scheme into the new CAP. So moderating this session, we have the professor at Czech University of Life Science Prague and coordinator of the ReForest project, Martin Lukak. We have with us as well Deputy Head of Unit from DG Klima at the European Commission, Valeria Forlin. Senior Policy Analyst, Land Use and Climate from the Institute for European Environmental Policy, Christina Springer, coming today from London. Thank you, Christina, to make the travel. We have my dear colleague, Tiago Zibacci, from the researcher at the European Economists Association. From the Land Banking Group, Customer Partnership Specialist, Pinas Irani. And from ReForest Action, Regenerative Project Manager, Jean-Christophe Renaud. Martin, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Thank you for joining us again for the second and much better panel than the first one. I am here joined by 5 esteemed colleagues who are experts on agroforestry and will talk about finance. So I thought I'll do this slightly differently from the previous panel in that I will not ask them directed questions because we are talking about money. So it could get a bit uneasy. So what I'll do is I'll just frame a topic and then we discuss it, and as you've seen, you can ask questions. There will be some people online asking questions too. So if I can ask you to keep your contributions short so we can go through as many opinions as possible, because it's 5 of you also, so just so that everybody gets to speak and put their point across. So speaking about framing, it was on Tuesday evening we discovered the perfect framing for this discussion. But unfortunately, we were in a bar. It was about 3 beers down the line, and nobody had a sheet of paper. So the second best framing I can do for you is farming is a business, obviously. People need to generate money in order to feed themselves and their family. Agroforestry is therefore also a business. It's just that it seems to me that the farmer doesn't capture all the benefits and the value from agroforestry. The productive function is captured by the farmer, give or take, but several other benefits go to other players. So what I wanted to ask you is your opinion on who are these other players that capture value from agroforestry? And perhaps aside from the public purse, because the previous panel discussed the public support for agroforestry. So is there anybody else that benefits and we should use these people to create financial instruments? Just.
Hello. Hi, my name is Pinas. I'm representing a company called the Land Banking Group. So what we do as a company is we make the business case for investment in nature. So we work with governments, financial institutions, corporates, and the job that we do 24/7 is help them understand what is the value of investment in regeneration projects. So to the question, this is basically my day-to-day job, which is how do I help a company understand that when they are making an investment in agroforestry, for an example, there's value for them. So let's take an example. When you're thinking of agroforestry, one of the basic values that one can provide is the fact that if you're a company that's buying, let's say, coffee or cacao from that particular land, the fact that the land is growing the coffee or cacao in a regenerative way means that there is resilience in the supply chain, which means that in an increasing temperature world, you will get your produce long term. You will get your produce not for the next just quarter, but you will also get your produce for 5, 10, 15 years, which means that as a company, you are mitigating the risk of not getting that commodity and going then to a market where you're buying the commodity at a higher price. So it's basically reducing that price margin for you. So one is you're mitigating the risk of buying the commodity at a higher price, what we call mitigation of value at risk. So that's one way to think of what is the value and who gets that value. So very clearly, if it's in your supply chain, you get a product, you get the product at a certain price, you get it at an immediate rate. So that's one example of how the value can be generated. Another example, which is not a very clear link, but another example could be when you're growing regeneratively or in an agroforestry system, you are sequestering carbon, you are helping water be in the soil, you are increasing biodiversity. What are then the benefits? The benefits are you are reducing, you're helping maintain a certain climate, you are helping water not be purified. So let's say you have a water utility company in the vicinity, and the water utility company has to purify the water so that the water reaches your tap in a certain standard. That cost of purification is reduced by the water utility company. So then you get paid for that. So that's another example of where the value can lie. And that's basically what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is who is the stakeholder in the region, so very local, very, very local, who is the stakeholder in the region that is going to benefit from the practices that you are applying every day, and how we measure it is in an outcome-based way, which means that we're not talking about, did I till the land, did I do this? It's basically what can you see when you're measuring, when you're monitoring. I'll pause there because I was asked to keep it short.
Anybody else? Raise your hand,
Me to say something. Jean-Christophe Renaud from ReForest Action. We are a private company working for private company. So that's an interesting question. What we are doing, we are dealing with agroforestry, I may say, in 3 phases. First, diagnosis, then implementation as a pilot, and then a scale-up. And where is this question is usually during the scale-up phase. What are the benefits of the agroforestry and how we can share those benefits between farmers and funders or the market. So where we are dealing today as a private company, we have many pilots in Europe and over the world, and this is always the same question. How to measure the impact of agroforestry, hoping it is positive, those impacts are positive, and then how to link both interests of funders, markets, and the farmer. So I don't have an answer, just a question. And this is where we are all the time. How we can imagine that from, I may say simply KPIs, key performance indicators, how they can become ROI, return on investment. And this is something I would say, sorry to not answer, but this is where we are every time. How we can imagine a pilot as a little scale with good results, a capacity of monitoring the results, and a strong data to share to anyone. And then we can go to a discussion of sharing this value of water, of climate, of yield, and this question of risk. At the end, the farmer risk, I think during the last panel you already explained clearly, but the philosophy is that the farmer cannot support the risk. It doesn't have to support the risk. And there we are. After a pilot, we know how to invest, the overall positive effects for economical services, what are the forecasts of the positive effects for the farmer on the yields, and then this moment of deciding how to allocate the funds for the first year to the 6 years, 7 years, as it was mentioned during the last panel, how to finance this transition from the first year to the 6, 7, sometimes 10 years. So sorry, it's not an answer, just a question.
Thank you for the question. If there are people in the audience who perhaps write the calls for Horizon Europe, very good question.
If I may, to complement what Jean-Christophe said, at the very last minute of the coffee break, I was just talking to Arnaud and Emmanuel, and they just said, the insurance companies don't want to pay anymore for farmers. And I was trying to reply that we were building the case that we want to reinforce that agroforestry systems in the long run, they should be seen as less riskier for these insurance companies because of all the regulating ecosystem services they can generate. They're less exposed to extreme events. As we know, reaching the 1.5 Celsius, these extreme events are happening more and more. And of course, if insurance companies profit-driven, they will be reluctant to keep providing their products to our agriculture. So this is also something that we are trying to study now as also part of the ReForest project. We are connected to friends, colleagues from University of Bonn. They have developed this decision support tool, which is on the right corner there, and is a cost-benefit analysis, and they are incorporating the risk parameters. And ideally, what we like to show in financial terms and net present value, return on investment, and yield, volatility, and so on, is that when we compare agroforestry against conventional farming, we'll see that these are less riskier and they suffer less from yield volatility over time and from extreme events and so on. So yeah, I think answering your question, insurance companies, banks, investment banks, blended finance initiatives, all these should be interested and are interested in financing. We have to close the information asymmetry between these players and support and empower farmers and advisors with these business models and financial projections to show, look, agroforestry in the long term is less riskier. We should invest in this and so on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make one more point? Yeah, of course. I was asking for permission not to take enough space. The question on how was asked, so I thought that maybe I could share 2 more points. If you imagine when we talk about rewarding the farmers for ecosystem services or the value that they generate, if we don't agree on the parcel of land that we are speaking about or the data on which we are speaking about that parcel, then that conversation becomes irrelevant. So that is why one of the things we think a lot about, and we call it the nature stack, starts with how do you then represent the biophysical in a digital twin format. So this, I think there was mentioned in the last panel also about the digital twin, but imagine we all agree that this is the parcel of land that we are talking about through technology. Once you agree that this is the parcel of land, on top of that sits the natural capital data or the performance data, which is soil health, water, biodiversity, which is open source. And then on top of that sits the economic data, which is what is the value of the soil health, biodiversity, water. And then on top of that sits the contracting piece, which is how does the money flow between the person who's benefiting to the land steward. So that's one way to think about it. The other topic that was mentioned about financial sector, one of the things we do is we talk to the financial sector a lot. And I'm sure you would agree that when you talk to a bank and you say soil health, he looks at you and says, huh? What is that? Or water holding capacity or biodiversity, right? You're talking to the financial sector that is very regulated, accounting based, about something that is very biophysical. So how do you then convert the biophysical data that you have, which is soil health, water, biodiversity, that the farmers on the ground understand, to something that the financial sector understands? And that is also something that we are closely working on, which is what is the agreement of what data is relevant to which stakeholder? Because the farmer wants very, very in-depth data about their land, because they know most about their land. But the stakeholders along the value chain want to see different types of data in a different way. So what is then that solution going to be? And we can talk more about that, but I'm asked to keep it short.
I go. Okay. So, yeah, good afternoon. Well, I was already introduced. I work in the unit in DigiClima, the European Commission, who is responsible for the development of the certification framework for carbon farming. And we are about to finalize a methodology for agriculture and agroforestry that will we hope will support result-based payments for farmers. So in the very good points you made, which I resonate a lot with me, this will sit in the link between the biophysical data and the monetary value of this data, or of this of the biophysical process behind. Our framework focuses on carbon, being the one that seems easier to, it's not easy, but relatively easier to quantify. But of course, all the nature co-benefits are very, very important and even mandatory in the case of biodiversity. So, but for agroforestry, that's very easy to show that there are biodiversity co-benefits. We just don't ask to quantify them because we understand that at this stage, at least, would be too complex. But as you might know, our colleagues in the environment are working also on the idea of nature credits. So we are trying to set the basis for the MRV, for the quantification, and the next step is to create demand. And when you ask who benefits from it, I think there is a very, very large awareness in the agri-food sector that resilience is not optional. Investing in resilience is not optional anymore. Well, maybe this is not really a European value chain, but it affects a lot of European companies. The volatility of cocoa prices has been really incredible in the last years, and this is the case also for other commodities. So investing in resilience is not, I think, is also in the mind of boards, and it's not just with the sustainability officers, and maybe this is also your experience. It's more and more on the agenda. The problem they tell us about is that resilience is a public good. Each farmer serves many different supply chains, and if only one of the companies in those different supply chains invests and not the others, there is a free riding problem. And so there are the pioneers who come to us and tell us, we are great, we do all these regional programs, but we cannot scale them up until all our peers do the same. So what we are trying to figure out now is how we can use our power of the European Commission as a convening power, let's say, to bring every actor around the table. Perhaps, like you were saying, it's really local based. So in the same region, you have the public municipality and the food companies that source from that region and the water utility. They all have a stake in the resilience of that land. And we commission, what we could do is to say, okay, who is interested in this region? Come together and we help you maybe with standard contracts or with some matchmaking initiative to bring your resources together and invest together. So this is what we call a buyer's club, although this name maybe does not really fit so well for this context because no one is buying anything. It's more about pooling resources together with the farmers. So we are trying to figure out how the credits that come out of CRCF are actually exchanged. And now then I stop because I have to be short, but this week's speech, because we are brainstorming, we're in a constant brainstorming, so every week our views change. But this week's view, I think, after discussing this morning in our team, we have to a bit disentangle what is the credit as a financial incentive and the reporting that companies do to show their emissions and removal. This is what the companies do. They want also to achieve some targets, some corporate targets of emissions reduction in their value chain. And these are a bit two worlds, the credits and the inventory, and the international standards are not, I don't think they really allow to use credits in your reporting, but what we think CRCF is still useful for is as a contract between all these buyers and the farmers so that we know, we see who put how much money, who bought how many credits. And then this information, we don't use it directly they cannot use it directly for the inventories, but it's more about when we allocate the outcomes of what happened on the ground, we need an allocation key, and the information about who financed what can support this allocation of the outcomes among the different investors. Because this is really a problem. This co-claiming is really blocking a lot of investment. But if I do this together with them, then who gets to claim what? This is unclear. So we hope we can a bit clarify using CRCF how this co-claiming could work. But now that I say it, I realize it's very complicated, and I hope we can find some easy solution to this. So to simplify, we would like to simplify this pooling of resources, but we're still figuring out how.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think I can pick up where Valeria left. So I'm from the Institute for European Environmental Policy from our Climate and Land Use Programme. We have been around for a long time. My senior colleagues like to say that we've been around since the very beginning of EU environmental policy, but not the common agricultural policy, which precedes us all. We work in a capacity as a consultant to the Commission a lot of the times, as a policy partner on Horizon projects, and our area is around carbon markets. So this is kind of the perspective I want to bring in here, and picking up from where Valeria left and responding to the question about who captures value. I guess a common concern with certification being a vehicle for climate policy in the EU is that it generates a lot of intermediaries that have to be involved in monitoring, reporting and verification, certification, etc. So this is something where we're trying to pay a little bit more attention to. And this is also recognizing that the reality of the gap that we're trying to plug. I think Beatrice mentioned the sort of 5,000 hectares versus the 8,000 that was the ambition. We know that the lack of success isn't necessarily the lack of money in some cases. So for example, in Germany, we have CAP eco schemes that offer 200 euros per hectare. This is likely more than a carbon market could provide, at least in the initial stages, and uptake is lacking. So it's hard to see how introducing more intermediaries, potentially more complex MRV procedures would help that market to get ahead. And just to pick up on the Buyers Club idea, this is a very important step in the development of EU climate policy, but it is a sort of demonstration case, and the capacity of that. I think there's talk of sort of 1 to 2 megatons that might be delivered in the next 4 years. I might be wrong. I don't know. 1 to 2 megatons across different removal types. Just to put it into perspective, we're falling approximately 60 to 70 megatons short of our land sink targets in the EU. So this is really a drop in the ocean. But maybe I'll pass on.
Thank you. Did you want to?
Just one thing, maybe, to share value, just an experience sharing. Step by step with the companies we're working with, they are asking us, what is the scale? Where starts the stakeholders where we have to deal with, and where it stops. It's just to share something else concerning another parameter, which is water, which is the crucial parameter of forest, of agroforestry, of agriculture, and so on. And step by step, the companies are asking us to develop some governance schemes, governance school at a watershed or sub-watershed level with the stewardship, water stewardship in this watershed level. And we think that step by step it is a good way of gathering people that have the same interest, specifically on the water parameter. But it helps to see what would be the forecast of this parameter of water with the temperatures, with climate change, whatever it is. But there you have, I may say, the principal actors of the landscape. Just.
Okay, thank you. I like this format because you have preempted half of my questions already, just discussing it. So I would like to push you on one thing which has been mentioned. Valeria touched upon this directly, and that is standardization and its relationship to monitoring and reporting and verification. So in your opinion, what is the right level of standardization we should aim for? Or are there different systems suitable for different contexts? I don't know. Because as Emmanuel was saying earlier, with this example of a hedge, which a 2-meter hedge is okay to trigger the payment, but 2 meter 10 already isn't. Can we avoid this kind of stumbling blocks in the standardization design?
Yeah, well, this is what I've been working on for the last 4 years. So it's a very tricky balance to find, the one between harmonized rules, which is what we want to do, but also not a straight jacket that everything has to do the same thing, because this definitely does not work in agriculture. Also, you don't want to lock in one way of doing MRV when in 2 years there could be a new technological breakthrough and we have a much cheaper, much better way of doing it. So in the end, the framework we are designing is quite open to innovation in MRV, and especially when it comes to sampling costs, which are the biggest costs in MRV. Now with remote sensing maps and AI, machine learning, you can reduce by a lot the number of samples you actually need to take, because you can if you stratify the land in the right way, you know which are the places where you really need to take samples, and you don't need to take too many. In agroforestry, it's a bit different. These are trees, so it's even easier in a sense to observe size and canopy with the satellites. So we really want to remain open to better and less expensive ways of doing MRV. Nevertheless, not anything should go. So we still need a filter of to assess the quality of models. Now we are trying to organize a process with the EEA, whereby models, when operators want to use models for a certification, they have to explain to the EA the quality of this model in terms of calibration, validation, accuracy, level of uncertainty, which is a standard practice in voluntary carbon markets. And then with time, we build up a database of models that are accepted for regions with certain characteristics. And we hope that this process being sitting with the EEA, which is for maybe those who don't know, it's the European Environment Agency in Copenhagen, and they are tasked with ensuring the quality of national greenhouse gas inventories. So the team who will help us doing this recognition of model is the same team helping member states improve their national inventories. There is a clear synergies between these two processes, although they are at different levels. So we hope that with time, I'm not saying everyone will use the same model, but at least we go towards some consistency or some synergy between verification of projects at the individual level and data that feed the quality of the national inventories. But all this is quite complicated, and well, we have some Horizon projects also working on it, not specifically on agroforestry, but it's one where we have these two projects and EURAF is in both. I don't know how you do it, but Jerry managed to put himself in both consortia, so CAFAMOR and OGCR, and they are also going to look at this connection between the national inventories and the MRV at the project level. I think I have veered a bit away from your question, sorry. Do
you want to go?
Yeah, just very quickly. Sorry if I steal a bit of your moderator role, but I wanted to ask another question which makes sense, which is who should, no, but who also should pay for the MRV, these tools and technologies? And I think we have two panelists here that could answer this question, because if we just expect farmers, especially if you're talking about smallholders, to pay for them, we know, at least from the research and literature and what we see on the ground, is they're quite expensive and requires skilled labor, implementation costs, and so on. And here I see the value of cooperatives also as very strategically, because they could then be upskilled and capacity and improve their capacity building, and then they can, as a spillover effect, reach out to their farmers. And as we were discussing in the coffee sessions, how the cost of MRV could be diluted to retailers, agri-food companies that are interested in testing and improving these indicators on the ground. And then, yeah, maybe this is a further question for the panel, more than anything, but I think it makes sense to.
I want to first address the first point that was raised, which was the standardization point. I think one of the things that when we are consulting or we are talking to any company, the question that we always ask is, what is the value of the data? What are you looking to find from the data, right? Because there is so much, like you said, with remote sensing, a lot is possible today. A lot of indicators are possible at scale in a very cost-effective way. So a lot of data does not actually answer the question, actually confuses the partners even more. So to understand what are you using the data for is very, very key. And typically across many frameworks, I can name a few, but when you think of what is actually useful, you think of soil health, you think of carbon, you think of biodiversity, you think of water very intrinsically. And there is a reason for that, because it has a holistic view of how do you measure the health of that ecosystem, right? So I feel like that is one thing to consider. The second thing to consider is, again, I'll make this point again, because it's very, very important, even from the reference point of bringing collaboration for investments, is every single stakeholder, when you're collaborating, wants to see the data very differently. And I will say this again and again. Every single stakeholder, when you're looking at the data, wants to see the data very differently. Because when you're talking to multiple stakeholders, they want the level of data for their own benefit. And it also addresses the point that you were making, which is when I am measuring for a certain purpose. So either it's related to my compliance needs or my voluntary needs, or giving my stakeholders in the organization some confidence. So we have to find this, like, almost the middle point of how does it serve everybody and how does it serve it in a way that is generating value, which is why the value conversation is very, very important, right? How is there value at every step? So value in getting the data so that you can give your stakeholders confidence, value so that you can make better decisions, value so that you can mitigate your risk, value so that you can prove resilience in your supply chain, value so that you can think of, okay, what are the benefits and how can I monetize this? So that's the way. If we think about it that way, which is not the data for the sake of data, but data for the sake of value for every stakeholder, then that solves a lot of the problems, because then everybody comes together and says, well, I want to pay for this because there is value in this for me. I'll pause there.
Thank you. Yeah, just very briefly, I mean, I think the answer to whether we need more standardization or not is just really dependent on the use case and the context, as my fellow panelists have already said. We definitely need more standardization in terms of data collection. We need more streamlining, and this is mostly with a view to lowering the administrative burden on farmers. What happens to that data that's collected, the way you interpret it, the way you use it for modeling, the emission factors that you use, that is a whole different story. And standardization there depends on exactly the use case for the measured emissions. If it's carbon credit that is used to make claims by corporates, maybe you need comparability and some standardization, but also accuracy. But just one final point is there is definitely, to your question about who should be paying for MRV, and this is just a very narrow perspective on this, there is definitely a case for public money to be used towards specific parts of the MRV that we will need, which is building, for example, baselines for soil, sort of pan-EU view, to make sure that for example, the credits that we generate are reliable and accurate, but also this is a public good, and we can elaborate on how that matters so much in the case of peatlands and agroforestry for sure. But I'll stop here and I'll let.
I think you said what I was supposed to say. There may be one point. Many big companies has their own MRV, so probably there is something to think on modules that could be introduced to existing MRV first. Second, I agree with you with the procedures that we can we can have an operational approach on the land. Maybe the research during the last panel, this question of mapping and the data are coming from European institutes, and the results are different depending if it is soil, if it is forest, if it is whatever it is. I just would like to mention that as private company, we are using those data, and those are very useful for our baselines. So if there is something the research can do, that's to harmonize those figures to help us to make some baselines without spending all the budgets on the ground, but using the free, the open data.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to take it back to, so we sorted MRV and standardization, that's kind of done, let's assume. I'd like to take it to the financial schemes. Where do you think the market or the development is going? Because agroforestry is a type of agriculture which requires long-term investment. Are there the tools that fit this scheme? So do people that you work with, do they want to do some kind of subscription-based, a one-off payment, annual payment? What are the actual tools under discussion here?
I mean, I think this was said before, but the obvious cash on the table is resilience. So that's something that is a lot on a lot of corporates' mind, which is I need to ensure that there is resilience in my supply chain. I need to ensure that I have products that I can deliver in the market, not only short term, but long term. I need to secure that at a price that I can then support for a while. So that's resilience is the key currency from a corporate standpoint. Obviously, then other players would look at it differently, right? Because again, it goes back to what is the value that agroforestry systems are delivering across not only the value chain, but even beyond the value chain. So locally, what is then the currency being delivered? If you think about financial institutions, more like banks or insurance companies, they are looking at it from a risk point of view. So if I am a bank that has provided loans to agroforestry systems, how can I then understand what that risk portfolio looks like, and am I going to be paid back those loans? So that's one way to think about, which is what is my risk exposure? How do I mitigate my risk exposure? And that also leads to, again, the investment in nature, right? Because nature is the one sure way of, I would say, shock absorption when climate is concerned, right? I mean, you are mentioning 1.5, but I was in Brussels a few weeks ago, and very openly, everybody was talking about a 2.5 or a 2.8 degree world. And a lot of companies have accepted that mitigation and adaptation has become a very real concept in their minds. So that's at a corporate level, that's a banking level. When we are living in this reality, the one sure way of mitigating that is investment in nature. That's going to absorb these shocks. I'm going to pause there. I hope I don't sound morose.
Yeah, no, I agree here within the supply chain, but sometimes we forget also we overlook the demand, and it's something that we also would like to improve the market integration from the agroforest region ag products into the end consumers, the demand. And of course, we're still missing labeling, better branding and marketing strategies to improve their market access, improve market integration from these farmers through the whole, at the end of the value chain, not just, of course, it's quite straightforward how agri-food companies or these big organizations would like to invest and value the resilience factor, but also how consumers would then value product that is coming from region ag input. So maybe I don't want us to again the moderator posing more questions, but I have more questions than answers. Sorry.
I had muted it, I think. Okay. I also had a question that comes up a lot when we speak about, again, agri-food companies investing in the value chain. Well, actually, it also comes to when you talk about credits for offsetting purposes. So the question about the temporality that you raised, are these payments every year? How long the farmer will be paid? I mean, with the CEP, we have some certainty. You are in an eco scheme, you know from the start how long the eco scheme will continue. But these are usually short, they will not cover the entire life cycle of an agroforestry project. CRCF says, well, now in the current methodology, you can get credits for 15 years, then you can renew it once, so you can go up to 30 years. And then you have to monitor that the carbon remains there for 5 more years. So the longest is 35. You can also from the start decide for a longer, the monitoring period, you can do it as long as you want, but you can only issue units for 30 years. And then maybe we have to see about a methodology about the management, agroforestry management. So, but that, it's another discussion. But then the problem is that these credits, first of all, they are only valid as long as monitoring is in place. So at some point they expire. So this is a problem for offsetting purposes. If one wants to claim, I bought this credit, so I offset my emissions, that's problematic. And then even within the value chain, the problem is, as I said before, there are many companies who are buying or sourcing food from that farmer. And they're sourcing food from that farmer this year, and they might not do the same next year. So they can change. Maybe it will be in the same region, but it will not be from that farmer. So in that context, what does permanence mean to the company who invested? Because yeah, in this is another reason why we need these cooperative approaches, because you never know which farmer from the region you will source from in 3 years. So you want everyone to invest in all the farmers in that region. So some solutions that are emerging. For the first problem about the claims made based on temporary units is the idea of a permanence fund, so a kind of an intermediary who would create portfolio of credits of different quality, different attributes, so different duration, different origin, and then you know that if I buy from that fund, I'm buying a portfolio, and the fund will ensure that these units, this fund is kept full forever. I mean for the longer term, and so. We need a governance system in which this intermediary that provides reassurances as to the permanence of the nature-based ecosystem overall. But then this is all to be built. So it's really at the cutting edge of the governance of carbon markets, and many are working on it. Whereas for the within value chain problem that I was referring to, as I said, if we manage to put together everyone in that region, then this problem disappears. But then, how this translates into the payments that the farmers receive, maybe needs some thinking. So it's very exciting, but there is a lot of governance questions to resolve.
If I can answer that just directly, there are pre-competitive consortiums that are coming into play. We are working with a few where, and like you're right. I think the question would be, how do you scale that, right? How do you scale that in a way that can address globally? But these pre-competitive consortiums where there's a cooperative, there's obviously land stewards that they're representing, and then there's companies that are buying from the set region coming together because they understand that, between the 5 of us, we are sourcing from that region for the next 10, 20 years. And that is the only region. And that, I guess, it's very specific use case because there are certain commodities where this is real and there are certain commodities where that is not real. So it is coming into play. We are working on those. But you're right, like that proof point will be the first step towards how do you scale and what do we scale and what are the learnings from that.
And in addition, for agroforestry, it's not like, we are not talking about soil carbon from the wheat. Agroforestry is like a decorative element around the field. Of course, it's more important than that, but it's not producing the actual commodity. So I guess this is an additional layer of who benefits from those edges there, because this is not wheat, this is not corn, this is an edge. Yeah. So I don't know how this is valued actually. Compared to the soil carbon, which really you can bring into your LCA. I mean, this is a carbon footprint of my wheat. The agroforestry component does not go into any carbon footprint of a product, you know? Yeah. So now I add on your questions.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question anymore, but just a general thought about the financing mechanisms discussion and kind of where we've just gone with it in terms of the really important questions about attribution and allocation of claims and etc. It's really important that we kind of keep the sequencing of financing in sight when we talk about accelerating agroforestry projects. And we seem to be at a stage where, well, in order for a farmer to get benefit from carbon credits, they need to first jump through many hoops, which include they need to be knowledgeable, they need to get advisory, they need to have establishment capital, they need to you know, they need to get insurance, which we've heard is harder and harder to get. And only then can they really get carbon revenue. And even if it's sort of advanced market commitments or forward contracts, it will come as quite a small factor ultimately for the farmer, I think. So I think this is just something to keep in mind, that we do get into all of the technical detail around demand for carbon credits, but we still haven't got through the initial hoops, I think.
Maybe just one thing. I don't know if it is a tool. I don't know if I answer to the question. It's about forecasting the risk. When discussing with the farmers, there are so many different situations of farming in Europe, and each situation has to be well studied and assessed with the farmer, and we have a responsibility to say where we are going together, whatever we are funding something or not. And maybe there is something to imagine with the huge data that are existing now in Europe with the research. That's wonderful. To try proposing proven model and forecast of risking, and then that it is possible to start a discussion on what to finance with public finance and also with private finance. I think we are invited also for that. Our clients are forecasting themselves in markets where they are probably losing. The yields are going down. We don't know exactly how, but they are going down. So there is an economical value, an overall economic value going down. So part of them are ready to invest, but they need us to propose something now, investing now for how long and what would be the results. And it's really difficult, but like a kind of indicator of resilience.
Yeah. Thank you. That was a very good point, yes. That's another research project, just that. Right, there's a question online, which is a signal for you to start thinking about your questions.
Yes, so 2 questions online, kind of related. First one from Jerry Larson from EURAF. Valeria, how could an agroforestry manager get credits for A, temporary carbon farming, B, harvested wood products, how is this certified? Example, FEC or PEFC. C, permanent removals in biochar, D, nature credits, ... How to track these together. And we have a related questions from potential future farmer of agroforestry from Cesnat Siros. So question for Valeria or anyone who knows about this. I am afraid that if we plan now, we won't be able to receive credits later on because it won't meet the additionality requirement. When should we start establishing our agroforestry system on arable land in order to comply with the principle of additionality required by the CRCF regulation. How do you think, realistically, in which year could a farmer first receive carbon credits for their agroforestry system?
So the question of Jerry, a farmer cannot sell credits for harvested products. For biochar, yeah, that's it. Because for biochar, the credits belong to the producer of the biochar, who is the entity that actually stores the carbon in the product. The farmer is just applying it on their soils. They can be paid by the biochar producer a part of the credit, but the credit belongs to the biochar producer. And for a harvested wood product, the credits will go to, for instance, a construction company who is constructing the building with wood. So we really need to make sure we don't double count the same carbon twice. The carbon goes from one value chain to the other, but when it moves from one to the next, there is a split in ownership of the credit. But the stacking of nature credits, that's more complicated. And this is really another very important discussion we need to start. On the additionality question, so now there is a transitional, it's a transition period in which CRCF is not up and running yet. So it's fair to say that if farmers start now, so either they start with another certification scheme to get credits from another certification scheme that has not yet been recognized by the CRCF, then the day that scheme gets recognized by CRCF, the project is also considered additional, because when they started, they still had to show to the scheme, presumably, that they needed some finance to get started. And so they already passed their additionality tests when they entered that scheme. And then the scheme one day will be CRCF, and then they will also issue CRCF units. If they start without any scheme, but maybe with CAP support, in that case, there is a transitional phase. So up between 2023 and now I have a huge doubt whether it is 27 or 2030, but I think 27, we say, yeah, because it's during the current CAP, there is a derogation from the requirement to show I only started because of the credits. That you don't have to show that. You still need to show that you need some more money to do it. So you can say, I received this money from the CAP, but it didn't cover 100% of my cost, then you're still considered compliant, additional. After 2027, so as of 2028 with the new CAP, ideally what we would like to see is that when you applied for the CAP subsidy, for instance, you mentioned, I will also one day need to sell carbon credits because otherwise I don't get enough money to cover my costs. Some proof that certification still is needed to make the activity viable. This is not just because it's fun for us to put more administrative burden on farmers, but it's because in carbon markets, if you are not able to show that the money from certification is needed for the activity to be viable, no one will want to give you the money, because they will say, why I give you money if this would have happened anyway? A completely different discussion is within the value chain programs, where maybe early movers or new movers, this distinction doesn't make so much sense. But that's why we would like to amend CRCF by the end of this year. We are looking into how to make it more compatible with this kind of reporting purposes in which additionality is not needed, is not an issue. So we would say, okay, if you want to sell credits on carbon markets, you still need to be additional. If you just want to certify your good performance, you can use CRCF, but you don't need to fulfill the additionality requirement. But this requires a change of CRCF, which we are working on to propose by the end of this year. There is something very important I didn't mention so far, but it was about what you said just before. Are there many other questions? Or
Online, no, but probably in the room.
Because you mentioned risk management, and you mentioned that the voluntary buyer scrub basically would not be enough, or this is what I read in your intervention. And So the buyers club that we are talking a lot about now is, as I said, something more soft, light touch, in which we use our convening power to bring buyers together around the same table. And this is something we can do. We don't need a law or any funding for that. But ideally, what we would like in our team, so I'm not talking for the entire commission, but for our team, is to get also some EU money from the next budget of the European Union. The multi-annual financial framework is being negotiated now with the member states. But at some point when negotiations, and with the parliament, when negotiations advance, we need to start also thinking internally, so all this money, how is it actually spent? And there is in the pillar, okay, there is a first pillar you discussed before, the national and regional plans, that's the shared management with the member states. And then there's a second pillar, which is a competitiveness fund. And we think these ideas of this catalytic role of public money to bring in, to crowd in private finance for carbon farming fits very well in what the competitiveness fund will do. But we need arguments to convince internally that we want a little piece of that pie. And so the idea is to propose a purchasing facility which will support buyers clubs, but a bit more, not just convening power, but like launching calls and putting some money on the table. So I'm very happy if people in this room like this idea and help us socialize it and make it mainstream, that everybody in Brussels talks about the purchasing facility for carbon farming and carbon removals, because we need all the weapons we can get, and also, but we also need clear ideas of what we actually want to do. So soon we will launch a survey for the Carbon Farming Buyers Club with also some questions about this purchasing facility. And this is a start. And we will have an event on the Buyers Club for carbon removals and carbon farming on the 20th and 21st of May. So 20th will be about the permanent CDR, 21st about carbon farming, where we hope we can get some real concrete discussion on a blueprint of this Buyers Club and purchasing facility.
Okay. Anybody wants to chip in before we take a question from the audience? Ali?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Gali from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. It's a question to Valeria. You mentioned that after 35 years, that piece of land, you will not support anymore, right? You have this 30 years plus 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking like then that would kick in impermanence, because then people would still lose some yield, because a certain part of the land is occupied by agroforestry. And the income that we get from that parcel of land is not enough to, compensate for the income that he has lost because of agroforestry. And then we would go back to the square one again. Like, people don't get support for this, right? Because they have been getting it for the last 35 years. So, what was the logic behind this to get into that decision? Thank you.
Now, the logic is that if you ask farmers to commit for too long times, they just don't want to do it. So it's a bit, actually I think once, not Jerry, but who is the Patrick Worms, the founder of EURAF. I heard he said this anecdote that in Africa there was a law, a French law when it was a colony, that if you plant a tree, you can never cut it forever, ever again. And no one was planting trees because they were too afraid of the commitment. And then when the French, we became an independent state, they canceled this law and people started planting trees because they said, okay, one day if I want to cut it, I can cut it. So now I can plant it and then I will see. So it's a bit, it's a balance again. If you put too long commitments, they just don't do anything and they're blocked. So we want to make it short and renewable. And then at some point also say, okay, if in 35 years you want to cut the trees, you can cut the trees. But let's just get the planet running for 35 years, it would already be a good.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe, can I say just one thing on that point? We usually study an agroforestry system with this idea that after 35 years, there will be a system that will give more benefits than the monoculture one. even after 30 years. So introducing cash trees, fruit trees, shrub, whatever, and other species. But this is usually what we do. If we don't prove or propose something that is better than monoculture, the farmers usually don't take this technique as a good one.
There is a question from Raina. Not for Valeria, please.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering what would happen if I want to have a timber plantation, like instead of just nut, if I have timber or if I have oak growing, which we have seen is quite often used also in Czech Republic as shelter belts, then, sorry. Yeah, so I was wondering if I want to keep it, if as a farmer, if I want to keep it for 60 years, 100 years or something like this, what would be the situation then with this?
I suppose that sounds like an afforestation project.
No, in the alleys, as an alley cropping system, yeah.
So, but just the species would be a longer
yes,
species.
Yeah, because it is not for nut harvesting, but rather for timber. And 30 years, you would not be making so much money. If I have it for 60 years, then I would be making quite substantial amount of money.
So the farmer would keep the wood longer and then harvest it when it's time to harvest it. Yes, that would be also possible. Yeah. So the idea is after you stop monitoring, you can do whatever you want with that timber or biomass. Because the unit is not valid anymore, so you're not committed to anything anymore.
Okay, last question. Yeah,
we are getting toward the end of the session, so maybe we take the so maybe we take the last questions and so here and one over there. Oh, sorry.
Hello, everyone. Just from Naturize. I have a little question. So we've talked a lot about what is being done for the supply side of carbon credits, nature credits, and innovative financing schemes for nature, etc. But I have the impression that whenever we talk about this, there's always one very important piece which is missing, is the demand side and the liquidity of it. And I'm really wondering, I work with companies on their nature strategy, and obviously the mitigation, the risk management, the insetting, etc. is an argument. Unfortunately, it doesn't echo as much as we would like and as sometimes we think within our own little niche and echo chambers. So what are different mechanisms that we could implement in order to ensure a takeoff of this market? Because even when I was at the Biodiversity Credit Forum, it's always something that we missed completely. And are there anything that you are doing within your own initiatives and projects to really, give momentum to this market? Because as long as no one will want it, as no one can trade it, you will not have project developers, you won't have any end clients, and the whole thing will be, sorry, but a bit of a pointless exercise.
Yeah, we are talking about the demand side. We're just very tentatively touching on it when we talk about the EU Buyers Club, for example. But you're totally right. I mean, that's kind of what we've been trying to convey, that the scale of it is likely to be quite minor, as long as it's based in the voluntary market. And so it's quite clear that there is a need for a compliance policy in whatever shape that takes. We've done work around different mechanisms that could stretch from sort of obligations on downstream agribusiness companies to an agricultural ETS. And clearly, I mean, there was a report from the Scientific Advisory Board a couple of weeks ago that indicated that there is a real need to shift to mandatory policies in the EU climate policy space. And yeah, I don't think we see a different way in which you could incentivize that demand to a degree where it delivers on the EU-wide objectives that we've stated in policy. Yeah. I don't think this is looking at you, I don't think this is a satisfying answer. But yeah, I don't know if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, policy is 100% agreed, but if you look at the private sector, you hit the nail on the head, which is we are not where we hoped we would be. I mean, I've been working for the organization for 2 years, and yeah, it's the same conversation every day. But I would say that what has progressed is there are conversations that we had 2 years ago that now have started to reflect more concretely in terms of, I do now want to understand the risk. I do now want to understand what are then the tools to mitigate that risk. I do now want to understand what I can do to build resilience in my supply chain. So I think that we are also getting better at describing the value, and describing the value in a way that the stakeholder on the opposite end understands. Because we, again, I think a lot of the other stakeholders want to see the metrics in the way they understand it. So soil health is not something an insurance will understand, but nature risk pricing is something that they can understand, because then they can mitigate that pricing premium within their portfolio. Stuff like that is, I think we're getting better at, and you're seeing that. I think the other side of it is also private money is starting to come, because there is intrinsic value in nature, and a lot of people in the world now are understanding that corporates or governments are putting off their targets. So I have a 2050 net zero target. I'm just going to put it off until my next person can take it on. But I mean, if we are smart, then we should invest in nature, because at some point this has to be realized, and only 30% of nature exists in the world. So I think a lot of high net worth individuals, philanthropies, family offices are also understanding that, and they're wanting to then secure that asset intrinsically. I hope that helps.
Maybe I could just share our experience. Some big companies, big brands are expecting from us an economical model, environmental economical model that can provide a PES, payment for ecosystemic services. And they are asking us how to produce a model that can introduce the commodities with the price, with all the value chain. It is complex, but I may say it's not zero brand that are asking for that kind of service. Some of our clients are asking for this, projecting for the next 10 years with the climate change, everything, but we cannot say there is zero investment on such model.
Christina? I don't know. Can we ask the audience if anyone's got any solutions?
No. There is a solution.
Solutions over there. I'm running to the solution.
Thank you. It's not a solution to this problem, but the problem of the farmers, and all of the hoops that they have to jump through to get carbon credits. There must be companies that do the work for a large number of farmers and get a percentage. There are. Okay. So maybe does that need to be scaled up for agroforestry? Yeah. Maybe it's not a solution. Those companies already exist.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Time's up. I will do the same thing as Konstantin did. So starting from Tiago at the far end, I will ask you to summarize your position in a short statement, looking at financing schemes for agroforestry. What should we do to make agroforestry great again?
Watch out with this, using these words together. No, I would say that from the research that we do every day, what we're trying to show is that from the farmer's perspective, it's not sustainable for them to rely just on subsidies. And the proposal that we are researching is not to substitute the subsidies, but to implement increment with de-risking and innovative blended finance mechanisms that could help to close this gap. So I think there are a lot of different mechanisms to be explored, and to help to close not just the investment gap, but also the knowledge gap and the policy gap that I was talking in the beginning. So just to keep short.
Thank you. Perfect. Ina?
Yeah, I would talk about the same point I've been talking about, which is we have to make the value clear to all the stakeholders. And once the value is clear, the money will flow. So that was one. And we have to simplify. If we talk about soil health, biodiversity, water, and all of the bureaucracy that goes with it, a lot of the stakeholders get put off. So simplify and show value.
I would launch an appeal that if the speech I tried to make about this buyer's club idea resonated with you and you have concrete examples because you actually did that. I think in ReForest, this is part of the project to look at this type of financial cooperation. Please send us information and we will be very happy to showcase it also the CRCF days or in other occasions. Thank you.
So just one concern that I take from the discussion, which is I'm worried that the value that we talk about and that's so clear to all of us just doesn't manifest on the timelines that we needed to manifest to farmers and to the industry and the agribusiness sector. And therefore, we probably need a compliance-based policy which obligates corporate actors to take part in this transition. And it's a difficult task to design that policy, but it's clearly a must.
Okay, last word, maybe one word, bottom up. We are discussing with farmers, with foresters, with people that are working on the ground all day long. And probably there are many solutions in their hands that we can ask them to communicate.
Okay. All right, thank you. Can we thank the panel, please? I'll wrap up. Okay, so I'll wrap up then. So thank you for coming. To me, this was most interesting and valuable to listen to all the opinions and ideas. I have scribbled down many, many things to follow up on. So I hope you found it equally as useful. There is a coffee and networking session now, so stay around. Yeah. Have a coffee, discuss, possibly ask the panelists even more questions.
Just one additional point to Martin. So first, thanks to all of you for staying, for listening to this really insightful and interesting conversation. This is an ongoing discussion. This is not a final event. I mean, it is one of our final events, but we are working on policy recommendation. So if any of you, if this topic really resonates to you and you want to keep working with ReForest on this and DigitAF, please reach out. I think you all have my email address, or you can find us on the internet, on LinkedIn, wherever. And we look forward to hear from you. Thank you for coming.